Chapter 786. Just as the gray-robed elder's sealing power came into contact with Nietion's dragon meridian, he felt a mighty lightning force rebounding back as though it was going to devour his sealing power. Old Chin looked at Nietion in shock. He was so shocked that he could not speak. He did not expect Nietion's dragon meridian to be so terrifying that even a 6th-rank sealer like him could not seal it. Nietion's dragon meridian was a 9-star dragon meridian. Sun Hai had tried to seal the 9-star dragon meridian, but failed. Sun Hai was a 7th-rank sealer, and he was much more terrifying than the gray-robed elder. If he could not seal the 9-star dragon meridian, the gray-robed elder would not be able to either. The 9-star dragon meridian was terrifying. Even a 9th-rank sealer could not seal the 9-star dragon meridian, let alone a 6th-rank sealer. Old Chun had lost an advantage if he could not seal Nietion's dragon meridian. "Kid, who the hell are you?" Old Chin's eyes trembled slightly, and his voice was slightly nervous. "Are you scared?" Nietion asked with a provocative smile. Fortunately, he had a 9-star dragon meridian. Otherwise, he would have been tricked by this old man. Old Chen looked at Nietion with a hint of panic in his eyes. The calmer Nietion was, the more panicked he became. At that moment, a name appeared in Old Chen's mind. 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss. As far as he knew, only people from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss had Dragon Meridian. The 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss was the core of the 10,000 Demons territory. It was tens of thousands of miles away from the Black Moon Empire. If Nietion was from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss, why was he here? Moreover, Nietion had taken out Xian Zhao's Crown Prince token just now. He should be Xian Zhao's subordinate. Why was he related to the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss? Could it be that Xian Zhao was also from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss? The Crown Prince of the Black Moon Empire was from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss? The more Elder Chen thought about it, the more confused he became. Nietion looked indifferently at the gray-clothed old man as the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Although he did not know what the latter was thinking, he could tell that the latter was indeed afraid. "Brat, I don't care who you are. Since you've met me, you must die." Old Chin suddenly looked at Sorrow Mo, who was hovering above his head. Even if Nietion was really from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss, if anything happened, it would be Sorrow Mo's fault. What was there to be afraid of? The most important thing now was to kill Nietion. Old Chin's eyes flashed with killing intent when he thought of this, and a dark aura surged out from his body. He was very confident that even if he couldn't use the seal, he could still kill Nietion. When Nietion felt the dark aura that was released from his opponent's body, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Soon after, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, and he said calmly, "I didn't expect you to be a dark attribute martial artist." No wonder Nietion felt the dark aura from his opponent's palm. It turned out that this person was actually an extremely rare dark attribute martial artist. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, thunder, light, and dark. Among the 9 elements, the rarest were the light and dark attributes, 1 in a million. Nietion, my strength is not something you can imagine. Consider it your honor to die in my hands. Old Chin smiled coldly. His body trembled slightly, and suddenly, endless dark aura was released. Waves of dark aura surged out, covering the sky and earth. Suddenly, the space within a few hundred meters was plunged into darkness, so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. When the crowd saw this scene, they were stunned. Originally, they had wanted to watch a good show, but now they couldn't see anything. All they could see was a mass of darkness in the Bloody Death arena. Nietion was surrounded by the dark aura. He felt an oppressive force seeping into his body, invading his limbs and all his meridians. That strange power was like a tentacle, locking his body. Nietion had never seen such a strange original spirit before. He couldn't help but frown. "Thunderbolt Dragon, come out." Feeling that his original meridians were about to be locked, Nietion shouted angrily. Suddenly, endless thunderbolt force surged in his body, directly driving the dark force out of his body. Huh? In the darkness, Old Chun let out a surprised voice and immediately retreated. Roar! At this moment, an earth-shaking dragon roar was heard. 100-meter-long thunderbolt dragon appeared, like a ray of light that tore the night sky apart. It coiled around Nie Tian's body, protecting him. It's a dragon. The crowd could vaguely see the figure of the thunderbolt dragon. In the darkness, a huge thunderbolt dragon appeared. This scene was too shocking. Nie Tian's figure was surrounded by the thunderbolt dragon, and terrifying thunderbolt force surged around his body. The gray-robed old man's dark force was very strange. Even if Nie Tian had the starry eyes, he still couldn't see the other party's figure. At this moment, he had to be careful. Swoosh! At this moment, a black blade shot out. Before Nie Tian could react, a wound appeared on his arm, and blood slowly flowed out. Master, you are in the light, and he is in the dark. You must be careful, Corpse Luo Demon King exclaimed, reminding Nie Tian. Swoosh! 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 Before Corpse Luo's voice faded, another 3 air-piercing sounds were heard. 3 wounds appeared on Nie Tian's chest, and the bones were visible. If it wasn't for his strong martial body, his sternum would have been shattered. At this moment, Nie Tian was in a very disadvantageous situation. He had completely become a fat piece of meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Nie Tian, let's see how long you can last. In the darkness, Old Chin's voice sounded, but it came from all directions, and there was no way to identify his location. Nie Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and his whole body released sword intent. However, at this moment, he discovered that his sword intent was actually suppressed in the darkness. After spreading a few meters around his body, he could no longer move forward. Dark attribute essence spirit martial artists are indeed not easy to deal with. Nie Tian said in his heart, but the determination in his eyes didn't change at all. He had experienced countless life and death situations. Of course, he knew that at such a time, he had to be even more calm. Nie Tian died obediently. The next moment, Old Chin's voice sounded again, and immediately a black snake-like tentacle shot out, attacking Nie Tian's chest. Boom! The thunderbolt dragon around Nie Tian blocked the fatal blow for him, and the entire dark space suddenly shook violently. At this moment, Nie Tian's eyes flashed with a sharp light. He vaguely saw a black figure approaching. Die! At this moment, the black voice suddenly roared, and immediately a palm force pressed towards Nie Tian. Immediately, a destructive aura spread out, wreaking havoc in the space. This is the time. Nie Tian's figure moved in an instant, and the thunderbolt dragon roared out like a bolt of lightning that cut through the night, violently rushing over. Rumble! There was a violent sound in the air, and under the impact of the thunderbolt dragon, the power of darkness actually weakened a little. Almost at the same time, Nie Tian's figure suddenly descended, and he was less than 5 meters away from the figure hidden in the darkness. Chapter 787. In the darkness, Nie Tian seized the opportunity and struck out with his palm. He gathered all the power of thunder and killed with one strike. The figure in the darkness sensed that something was wrong and exclaimed in surprise. His expression changed abruptly. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. The palm force coming at him was mighty and extremely fast. There was no way to dodge it. In a hurry, the gray-robed old man's heart thumped violently. At this moment of life and death, he had no choice but to fight. Boom! The gray-robed old man struck out with his palm. The power of darkness gathered into a black palm and met the thunder palm. The next moment, a rumbling sound erupted in the void. The void seemed like it was about to explode. The crowd was stunned. They could only see the power of thunder and the power of darkness fighting and devouring each other in the sky. But they did not know what was happening. Bang! At that moment, a muffled sound was heard. A figure flew backward. The darkness in the void instantly dissipated, and a giant thunder dragon that was hundreds of meters long appeared in front of everyone. It really is a giant dragon. When the crowd saw the giant dragon in the sky, they were stunned and shocked. Their hearts surged with endless worship. Nietion stood on the giant thunder dragon like a god of thunder. He stared at the gray-robed old man in the distance with a murderous gaze. At that moment, Elder Chin's entire body was dripping with blood. His face was as pale as a sheet. It was as if he had aged dozens of years in an instant. "This is impossible." He clutched his chest and roared angrily with an unwilling expression. However, he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. In a head-on collision just now, Nietion had directly defeated the gray-robed old man. One palm, just one palm, was enough to beat a 9th-level heavenly evolution warrior to the point that he could not fight back. The gray-robed old man did not understand why Nietion was still able to capture his position in the darkness. He did not understand. He was clearly a 9th-level heavenly evolution warrior. Even if he had attacked hastily, he should not have been defeated by a 5th-level heavenly evolution warrior. He felt that all of this was so unreal and impossible. It was like a dream. Needless to say, it was fortunate that Nietion had activated the Starry Sky Eyes. Otherwise, it would be utterly impossible for him to sense the gray-clothed old man's location. The reason why he was able to defeat his opponent with a single palm strike was because he had used all of his strength in that palm strike, while his opponent's palm strike was hurried. On the other hand, it was because he had awakened 140 billion stars' power in his body. The power of the stars, the origin of power. His forte lay in close combat, and he could defeat his opponent in an instant. It was no exaggeration to say that even a 9th-level heavenly evolution martial artist would be defeated by Nietion's fist in a hand-to-hand fight with Nietion. Nothing is impossible. Nietion's figure descended from the dragon. His entire body emitted a powerful and oppressive aura, and a sharp killing intent enveloped him. "Don't kill me," the gray-robed old man exclaimed when he sensed the killing intent. He looked up into the sky. Nietion approached step by step, and the sword intent on his body gradually condensed. He had a strange smile on his face, as if he was thinking about something. The intense killing intent approached step by step, and the despair in the gray-robed old man's eyes intensified. His figure could not stop retreating, but his eyes would occasionally look up at Mo Yoshang, who was in the sky. "Old bastard, in the eyes of your young master, you're nothing more than a dog. He won't come to save you." Nietion spoke without the slightest scruple, as if he was talking to sorrow. "Mo, young master, save me." At this time, the gray-robed old man could no longer care about anything else, and he screamed miserably. At this time, only Mo Yoshang could save him. If Mo Yoshang did not act, he would definitely die. I've said before, he won't act, and he doesn't dare to act, because he's no match for me. Nietion's lips curled into a stern smile as he spoke in a deep voice. A terrifying sword intent surged in his palm. As long as he wanted to, he could take the gray-robed old man's life at any time. Is this guy courting death? When the crowd heard Nietion's words, their hearts trembled violently. The latter actually said that Mo Yoshang was no match for him. This was clearly a naked provocation. Nietion was forcing Mo Yoshang to act. Was he an idiot? Courting death. As expected, Sorrow Devil, who was high up in the sky, couldn't bear it any longer. His demonic face instantly turned sinister, and with a roar, he directly charged down. A wave of destructive power came crashing down towards Nietion. Mo Yoshang could allow Nietion to kill Old Chun, but he could not allow Nietion to say that he was no match for his opponent. He, Mo Yoshang, was one of the 9 demons, ranked 3rd among them. Even Qianlong, Yingzheng, and Xian Shao, who were ranked above him, he did not respect them. How could he tolerate Nietion belittling him? Mo Yoshang, you've really made a move. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Mo Yoshang made a move. Not only did Nietion not feel fear, but he even smiled coldly in his heart. He had provoked Mo Yoshang with words to force Mo Yoshang to make a move. Nietion knew that with Mo Yoshang's character, Even if he killed the gray-robed elder and won this last round, he would not be able to walk out of the Blood Death arena. If he wanted to walk out of the Blood Death arena, Nietian would have to rely on his own strength. And the biggest obstacle for him to do so was Mo Yoshang. As long as he dealt with this person, the guards of the Blood Death arena would not be a problem. At this moment, Nietian raised his arm, and Sword Intent whistled out, slamming into the gray-robed elder. The latter directly exploded into a pool of blood. Die for me. Seeing this scene, Mo Yoshang became even more furious. His eyes turned scarlet, and his aura suddenly soared. A huge wave of destructive energy pressed down on Nietian. After killing the gray-robed elder, Nietian suddenly raised his head. His eyes slightly narrowed, and a starlight flashed. Then, a powerful spiritual deterrence was released. All of Sarumo's attention was focused on killing Nietian. That sudden mental pressure caused his soul to tremble, causing him to instantly lose control. A trace of sluggishness flashed through his eyes, and his aura instantly disappeared. Dying without hesitation, Nietian took a step forward, and his figure soared into the sky. Like a sharp sword, he tore apart the heavens and earth. Divine War Emperor Fist. With a deep roar, Nietian punched out. A golden fist shadow rose up, attacking Mo Yoshang. At this moment, Mo Yoshang's mind suddenly recovered, but he saw a huge fist shadow coming at him. His eyes narrowed, and he wanted to act, but it was too late. Pump! With a muffled sound, Mo Yoshang's figure was directly blasted into the sky. Fresh blood rained down from the sky. The crowd was completely stunned by this sudden scene. The entire square was deathly silent. Countless eyes stared at Nietian in a daze, unable to react. Nietian swept a glance over, not caring about Mo Yoshang's life or death. The latter was caught off guard by his fist. Even if he didn't die, he would be heavily injured. He was no longer a threat. Nietian's figure descended, arriving at a hidden door in the Blood Death arena. Facing the door, he punched out. The Thunder Dragon appeared again, and the hidden door was directly smashed to pieces, revealing a passage. Cold Sky. Nietian roared towards the passage, his voice like thunder. Chapter 788. Han Tian smashed through the passageway and rushed out. When he saw Nietian's figure, he knew that Nietian had won. He didn't dare to imagine how Nietian had won. 25 victories to gain freedom. This was a feat that no one had ever accomplished in the Blood Death arena, but it was finally accomplished by Nietian. Seeing that Han Tian was fine, Nietian let out a long sigh of relief. Looking toward the square, he called out, "Yu Jiao." Yu Jiao reacted and jumped down for the Blood Death arena, standing beside Nietian and Han Tian. "Big brother Nietian, are we going to charge out?" Yu Jiao couldn't believe that Nietian had actually killed the gray-robed elder and heavily injured Sarumo. At this moment, her emotions were surging, and she was somewhat excited. "Of course we're going out, but before that, we still have something to do." Nietian nodded, but the corners of his mouth curled into a strange smile. He turned to Han Tian and asked, "Han Tian, do you know where the slaves are kept?" "I know." Han Tian was stunned for a moment, but he immediately understood what Nietian wanted to do. He immediately became excited and shouted, "Follow me." Nietian was asking where the other slaves were because he wanted to release all of them. "Stop." At this time, the guards of the Blood Death arena finally reacted. A dozen black-robed cultivators appeared in the sky and shouted in unison. But Nietian and the rest ignored them and followed Han Tian into the passageway. The dozen black-robed cultivators landed and quickly chased after them. Han Tian led the way, while Nietian and Yu Jiao followed closely. After a while, the three arrived at a place that looked like a dungeon. Nietian looked around and saw many small dark rooms, and in these rooms were countless despairing faces. These people were squeezed in the small rooms, and there were even many children who were only 10 years old. "Bastard!" Nietian saw this scene, and his blood boiled, as if he was about to burst into flames. The people of the Blood Death Arena were worse than beasts, not even letting children go. Who are you people? At this moment, a voice sounded. It was the guard in charge of the slaves. Swoosh! Nietion didn't reply at all. With a casual wave of his hand, a strand of sword intent flew out and directly blasted the guard into meat paste. Han, quickly save us! Quickly save us! Someone recognized Han and started to shout. Good. Han nodded. His fists turned to stone as he walked out of the room and smashed the iron lock. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds could be heard as the locks were smashed one by one. The door of the room was opened, and countless slaves rushed out. At this moment, they felt a sense of freedom that they had never felt before. Stop! What are you doing? At this time, the dozen or so black-clothed martial artists appeared. When they saw that the prison cell for the slaves had been opened, they screamed in fright. You're courting death. Nietion was just worrying about how to vent his anger when this group of unlucky fellows appeared. He took a large step forward and punched out. The roar of a dragon shook the heavens as a lightning dragon rushed out. The violent power of thunder shook the entire dungeon. Blood-curdling screams rang out. These black-clothed martial artists with the strength of Heavenly Evolution Level 5 had no way of fighting back in front of Nietion. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen martial artists were blasted into pieces by Nietion. Not even their corpses were left. A moment later, all the prison cells were opened and all the slaves came out. Nietion glanced around and roughly estimated that there were at least a few thousand people. Nietion didn't dare to stay for too long. More guards would definitely rush over later, and it would be troublesome then. Everyone, charge out with me. He raised his arm and shouted. Then, he took the lead and rushed out of the passageway. The crowd rushed out majestically, and the entire Blood Death ground trembled. Nietion rushed out with thousands of slaves and went directly to the Blood Death ground. At this time, the crowd in the square was still there. When they saw thousands of slaves rushing out together, they were completely dumbfounded. Nietion took a look. The square was dozens of meters high and not very far. As long as they were on the square, the slaves would be relatively safe. When he thought of this, Nietion's figure trembled, and the divine wheel sword appeared. With a mighty slash, it directly blasted a corner of the square down, and a slanted passageway appeared. Yu Jiao, lead everyone out. Nietion looked at Yu Jiao and said in a deep voice, Big brother Nietion, what about you? Yu Jiao was stunned for a moment and then asked, I'll go see if there are still people in the prison cells. Nietion said and rushed into the passageway again. Before Yu Jiao could say anything, Nietion's figure had already disappeared. Thousands of slaves stepped into the passageway that Nietion had blasted out and rushed toward the square. Nietion returned to the prison cells alone. His figure was very fast, and he checked room by room to make sure that no one was left behind. He walked to the end of the prison cell and looked at the innermost part of the prison cell. At this moment, his gaze suddenly changed. He actually saw a familiar figure, and this figure was actually asleep. Nietion stepped into the prison cell and looked at the big fat lump under his feet. He shouted angrily, Jean de Bayo! The figure suddenly sat up and opened his sleepy eyes. He rubbed them, then rubbed them again and again. When he finally saw the face of the person in front of him clearly, he actually hugged Nietion's thigh and burst into tears. Boss, I've waited for you. That's right. The person who appeared in front of Nietion was none other than his good brother, Jean de Bayo. Nietion did not expect to find Jean de Bayo in this place after searching for so many times. Are you okay? Nietion used his divine sense to check Jean de Bayo's body. After confirming that the latter was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. I'm fine. Jean de Bayo finally reacted and actually chuckled. Nietion was speechless. This guy could still laugh in the bloody death ground. He was really too optimistic. If you're fine, then quickly get up. Let's go. Nietion kicked Jean de Bayo's leg and said impatiently. All right. Jean de Bayo suddenly stood up and said, Boss, I knew that you would come to save me. If I relied on my cheap teacher to save me, I would have died long ago. Nye Tian was speechless. This fatty was really too optimistic. It was purely a coincidence that Nye Tian appeared here. Fortunately, Nye Tian was attentive and came back to check. Otherwise, he really wouldn't be able to find Jean de Bayo. It had to be said that this fatty's heart was really big. He could still sleep in the blood death arena, and he could even sleep so soundly. Everyone had left, but he was still sleeping like a dead pig. There was really no one else like him. Nye Tian rushed out of the bloody death ground with Jean de Bayo. Seeing that there was no one left in the bloody death ground, it seemed that the slaves had already left. Chapter 789. After a while, Nye Tian and Jean de Bayo rushed out of the blood death field and came to the surface. Big brother Nye Tian, Yu Jiao, and the others were all waiting for Nye Tian. They were very happy to see him return. Nye Tian nodded slightly. His gaze swept across the crowd and said loudly, "Everyone listen up. You are now free. If you want to leave, you can leave now." All the slaves were stunned. They looked at Nye Tian in disbelief, wondering if they had heard wrong. This person risked his life to save them. He didn't ask for anything and just directly let them go. Was this possible? Nye Tian didn't have time to say too much to them. He just said, "Remember, you are free people. No one can decide your life or death. Leave now." Such a big thing happened in the blood death field. The force behind it must have been alarmed. If this force appeared, it would be too late for these slaves to leave. Thank you, benefactor. We will never forget benefactor's great kindness. Someone knelt in front of Nye Tian and said gratefully. Nye Tian's whole body surged with a sword intent. He directly lifted up the kneeling person and said loudly, "You are free people. You don't need to kneel to anyone. I'm not worthy of your kneeling." Nye Tian wouldn't kneel to others. He also didn't need others to kneel to him. The slaves stood up and looked at each other. They had never seen such a strange person like Nye Tian. "Benefactor, farewell." Someone stood up and said to Nye Tian before leaving. Following that, a large number of slaves left one after another. They would remember this face in their hearts. It was this person who gave them freedom. Soon, the thousands of slaves were almost gone. However, there were still dozens of children around 10 years old. They were stunned and looked at Nye Tian helplessly. Nye Tian looked at the dozens of children with a slightly troubled expression. These children were not strong. Asking them to leave by themselves was equivalent to asking them to die. In this world where strength was respected, it was almost impossible for a 10-year-old to survive. "Big brother Nye Tian, leave these children to me. I promise you that as long as the Yu family exists, these children will definitely be there." Yu Jiao saw that Nye Tian was in a difficult position, so she took a step forward and said solemnly. After all, Yu Jiao was a kind-hearted girl. She couldn't bear to see these homeless children. "Very well." Nye Tian nodded slightly. The Yu family was one of the 4 great families of the Black Moon Empire. It was naturally not a problem for them to take in a few dozen children. Nye Tian told Yu Jiao to keep these children a secret for the time being and not let anyone else know about it. He had released all the slaves from the blood death ground, and the fate of that young Lord Mo's sorrow was still unknown. The blood death ground would definitely not let this matter rest. Fortunately, while Nye Tian's identity was exposed, Yu Jiao's identity was not. Thus, it was impossible for the Yu family to be implicated in the blood death field. Then, Nye Tian and the rest arrived at the Yu family. Yu Jiao first settled down the dozens of children, then arranged a small courtyard for Nye Tian and the others. Nye Tian didn't have a place to stay, so he temporarily stayed at the Yu family for a night. In the small courtyard, 3 figures stood. One figure was very tall, one figure was very huge, and the last figure was very normal. These 3 people were, of course, Han Tian, Jean de Bayo, and Nye Tian. "Benefactor, please accept Han Tian's bow." Suddenly, Han Tian knelt down on one knee towards Nye Tian and sincerely expressed his gratitude. "Han Tian, quickly get up." Nye Tian was stunned for a moment and hurriedly let Han Tian get up. "Boss, don't tell me you're going to accept another disciple." Jean de Bayo, who was watching from the side, was startled. He chuckled and teased. "Disciple." Han Tian was stunned for a moment. He immediately reacted and said in a clear voice, "Teacher, please accept this disciple's bow." Han Tian suddenly recalled that Nie Tian once said that saving him was useful. Thus, when he heard Jean de Bao's words, he mistakenly thought that Nie Tian wanted to accept him as a disciple. Although Nie Tian wasn't that old, his strength far surpassed Han Tian's. He was qualified to be Han Tian's teacher. Nie Tian was speechless. He then smiled faintly and said, "Han Tian, are you really willing to be my disciple?" Han Tian is willing. Han Tian's face was solemn. "Good." Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said, "Then I will accept you as my disciple." Following that, Han Tian completed the apprenticeship ceremony and officially became Nie Tian's 13th personal disciple. To be able to accept a heavenly stone body as a disciple was also not bad. When the heavenly stone body was cultivated to the extreme, the martial body would be strong, indestructible, and extremely powerful. If Han Tian could enter the heaven realm, he would definitely reach the heavenly emperor realm. Next, Nie Tian planned to let Han Tian and Xian Miao Miao cultivate together so that his strength would increase again in 2 months. This way, he would have more confidence in entering the forbidden land of wind and cloud. There were a total of 5 places to enter the forbidden land of wind and cloud. Nie Tian, Xian Xiao, Jean de Bao, Han Tian, and the last one, Yu Jiao, but it was not confirmed yet. Nie Tian asked about Jean de Bao and found out that when the latter entered the summer world, he was separated from Sun Hai. After that, he was captured by the people of the Blood Death Field and became a slave. However, Jean de Bao was quite crafty. He sealed his strength and pretended to be sick. Therefore, he didn't go to the Blood Death Field these 2 days. Nie Tian then let Jean de Bao and Han Tian go to sleep and return to his room. In the room, Nie Tian didn't think about other things. Instead, he quickly entered a state of cultivation. In the Battle of the Blood Death Field, his strength increased by 2 levels. He needed to stabilize it. Nie Tian first checked the Eye of Starry Sky. His strength increased by 2 levels. The second level of the Celestial River awakened another 20 billion star power. The Eye of Starry Sky became even more tyrannical. Nie Tian estimated that the power of absolute tremor had increased by 2 times. In a situation where the opponent wasn't paying attention, he was confident that he could instantly kill an ordinary first-level heaven human martial artist. In the Blood Death Field, Sorrow Mo had almost died from absolute tremor. I wonder how Sorrow Mo is doing. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up slightly. He then began to stabilize his strength. At the same time, in the Blood Death Field, in the hall, a white-haired figure was sitting upright. His whole body was releasing a powerful aura. His face was gloomy, and he didn't say a word. Below this person, on the left and right sat 2 people. One was a coquettish middle-aged woman, and the other was Sorrow Mo. Sorrow Mo had been seriously injured by Nie Tian. At this time, he still hadn't recovered. His face was pale, and his expression was gloomy. Being injured by Nie Tian, his body wasn't the only thing that was injured. His martial heart was even more injured. To think that he, a dignified heaven-human realm powerhouse, one of the 9 demons of the summer world, was seriously injured by a heaven evolution realm martial artist, and even almost died at the hands of the other party. This humiliation he couldn't tolerate. If he couldn't kill Nie Tian, Sorrow Mo wouldn't be able to eat or sleep. "Who is it?" Suddenly, the white-haired old man spoke. His voice was filled with uncontrollable anger. "Father, that person is called Nie Tian. He's Crown Prince Xian Zhao's man." Sorrow Mo's face was cold, and his voice was almost squeezed out from between his teeth. "Crown Prince Xian Zhao." The white-haired old man stood up and roared in anger. "Crown Prince Xian Zhao, you dare to bully me, Bai Ming Mo. If I don't kill you, I'm not called Dark North Monarch." Chapter 790. In the Great Hall, Mo Baiming was enraged. His aura exploded, and the entire Great Hall could not withstand it and collapsed. "Father, let's kill our way to the Crown Prince's residence and settle the score with Xian Xiao." Mo Sorrow did not want to waste a single moment. He wanted to find Tion and tear him to pieces. All right, Mo Biming roared and retracted his aura. He took a step forward like a god of death. It had always been him, Dark North Monarch, who bullied others. When had he ever been bullied like this? If he did not get back at them, Mo Biming would feel like there was a fishbone stuck in his throat and a thorn in his back. Teacher. At this time, the beautiful middle-aged woman who had been silent all this time spoke up. I feel that this matter is a little strange. Our Blood Death Ground has always had a good relationship with the Black Moon royal family. Crown Prince Xian Xiao has no reason to go against the Blood Death Ground. There might be some hidden story behind this. This woman was Mo Biming's first personal disciple, Yuhua. She was even stronger than Mo Sorrow. She was already at the second level of the Heaven Realm. Senior sister. Without waiting for Mo Biming's response, Mo Dushang said, "You don't know, but that Crown Prince Xian Xiao is an extremely arrogant person. He has always been domineering and tyrannical. He must have felt uncomfortable seeing that our Blood Death Ground has earned too much money, so he sent people to cause trouble." Yu Hua frowned and said solemnly, "I've seen Crown Prince Xian Xiao before. Although this person is domineering, he is not an impulsive person. He knows the Blood Death Ground's backer and will not provoke them easily." Yu Hua looked at Mo Biming and said, "Teacher, why don't you let this disciple go to the Crown Prince's residence to investigate and get to the bottom of this matter? If this is really Crown Prince Xian Zhao's doing, we will definitely not let him off. If there is some hidden story behind this, it is not good for us to fall out with Xian Xiao. After all, he is the Crown Prince of the Black Moon Empire. The Black Moon Empire's strength cannot be underestimated." Mo Biming thought for a moment and then waved her hand. "Hua, your words are not without reason. However, I have long heard that Xian Xiao has always been domineering. No matter what the truth is, Xian Xiao cannot escape responsibility because that person has Xian Zhao's Crown Prince token. I've decided to personally make a trip to the Crown Prince's residence. If Xian Xiao knows what's good for him, he'll hand over the man named Tion. If he doesn't, then don't blame me, Mo Biming. Even if Xian Tianluo appears, I will still take Xian Zhao's life. Father is wise." The corners of Sorrow Mo's mouth curled into a cold smile, and his eyes were filled with sharp, killing intent. "You stay? I'll go with Hua." At this moment, Mo Biming suddenly shouted in a cold tone. "Father!" Mo Dushang wanted to say something, but when he saw Mo Biming's cold eyes, he swallowed his words and could only say, "Father, if Xian Xiao hands over Tion, don't kill him. I want to kill him with my own hands." Mo Biming nodded and left with Yuhua. "Tion, if I don't kill you with my own hands, my name isn't Sorrow Mo." Looking at the backs of Mo Biming and Mo Biming, Mo Yoshang roared furiously, following which he spat out a large mouthful of blood. "You residents, in a secluded courtyard." The sun rose, and all living things woke up. The first ray of sunlight shone into the room, and the mottled light reflected a figure. It was Tion. Tion walked out of the room. After a night of cultivation, his condition had recovered to its peak. His whole body released a sharp chi, like a sharp sword that was unsheathed, showing off its edge. Fortunately, I have the Primal Chaos original coffin. Otherwise, I would need at least a few days to completely recover my mental strength. The corners of Tion's mouth curled up as he muttered to himself. With his current mental strength, he could use absolute tremble twice at most before he would be mentally exhausted. The recovery of mental strength required a very long time. Fortunately, he had the Primal Chaos original coffin. Otherwise, he would not have any mental strength for a few days. At this moment, Tion was at the Heavenly Evolution Stage 4. The power of the stars in his body had awakened 140 billion, which was extremely terrifying. More importantly, Tion's swordsmanship realm had advanced to the sword spirit realm. This was the key to the improvement of his combat strength. If he obtained the upgraded Heaven Slash Sword, Tion was confident that he could deal with any warrior below the Heavenly Evolution Stage 9. Furthermore, this was under the condition that he did not use any powerful trump cards. At this moment, Nyetian had only been in the Sumi world for 3 days. The speed at which his strength improved was simply abnormal. Boss. At this moment, Jean de Bayo's figure appeared. This fellow was still the same as before. He smiled wretchedly and had a carefree look on his face. Not bad. You have been in the Sumi world for 2 days, and your strength has increased by 1 level, Nyetian said calmly as his divine sense swept across Jean de Bayo's body. When he was in the 3,000 small worlds, Jean de Bayo had cultivated to the first tier of the divine wheel in the absorption formation. At this moment, he was already at the 2nd tier of the divine wheel. Being able to increase his strength by 1 level in a few days was partly because of Jean de Bayo's own talent, and partly because of the Sumi world itself. The Sumi world was a middle world. The spiritual power of heaven and earth was dozens of times denser than that of the 3,000 small worlds. When warriors from the lower worlds came to the Sumi world, their strength would increase very quickly in the early stages. That's right. Jean de Bayo smiled proudly and said, Boss, I could be considered a martial arts monster now, right? Nyetian's face darkened. Suddenly, he noticed that Han Tian and Yu Jiao had arrived. He smiled embarrassedly and said, Little fatty, your strength has increased a little, and you become arrogant. If you're a martial arts monster, then Han Tian and Yu Jiao are supreme monsters. With Jean de Bayo's current strength, he could barely be considered a monster in the 3,000 small worlds. However, in the Sumi world, he could only be considered trash. Not to mention others. Any random person from the 4 academies of the Dark Moon Empire was stronger than Jean de Bayo. Boss, you can't be so sarcastic. In any case, I, Fatty, am also a sealing master. You have to be respectful towards me. Understand? Jean de Bayo laughed mischievously, the fat on his face trembling. Nyetian was speechless. With Jean de Bayo's martial arts attitude, he still wanted to be respectful. It would be good if he didn't give him 2 kicks. However, everyone had their own personality. Jean de Bayo's way of doing things was like this, so Nyetian wouldn't force him. Teacher. Han Tian walked over and called out respectfully. Big brother Nyetian. Yu Jiao and Han Tian came together, and the 2 of them stood side by side. Damn, it's so early in the morning, and you 2 came together. Could it be that you slept together last night? Jean de Bayo saw Yu Jiao and Han Tian appear together, and he let out a strange cry and laughed mischievously. Damn fatty, what nonsense are you talking about? Yu Jiao scolded, her pretty face blushing. Nyetian smiled bitterly and said, Miss Yu Jiao, this brother of mine likes to joke. Don't lower yourself to his level. At this time, the 2nd layer of the star river within Nyetian's body had awakened the power of 40 billion stars, which allowed him to freely control the eyes of the stars, and would no longer be embarrassed like before. Nyetian looked at Yu Jiao and Han Tian, and suddenly felt that the 2 of them were quite compatible. Chapter 791. Boss, this disciple of yours is too unkind. He's trying to steal teacher's wife. Who knew that just after Nyetian praised Jean de Bayo in his heart, the latter looked at him strangely and said. Nyetian was speechless. This fatty really dared to think of anything. Although Yu Jiao was beautiful, Nyetian didn't have any thoughts about her. He just regarded her as a good friend, nothing more. In Nyetian's heart, there was only one person, and that was Mo Rushi. However, at this time, Mo Rushi and the others were still in seclusion in the 3,000 small world, and it would take at least a few months for them to finish. Nyetian could only endure the pain of yearning for a few months for the time being. After eating, Nyetian told Han Tian and Jean de Bayo not to leave the Jade Mansion even half a step. Nyetian predicted that the mystic Moon Imperial City would not be too peaceful today. Yesterday, he made a mess in the Blood Death Field, released all the slaves, and killed many people from the Blood Death Field. The Blood Death Field would certainly not let this go. Nyetian's identity had been exposed, so the Blood Death Field's first person to find was him. However, the Blood Death Field would not directly look for Nyetian. Instead, they would look for Crown Prince Xian Xiao, because Nyetian used Xian Zhao's Crown Prince token in the Blood Death Field. Poor Crown Prince Xian Xiao. He would soon take the blame for Nietian. Then, Nietian asked Yu Jiao to find Xian Miao Miao. Big brother Nietian, you didn't come to the guild yesterday. Teacher and I were worried to death. Xian Miao Miao came and said with a nervous face. I'm fine. Nietian smiled faintly. However, Jean de Bayo, who was at the side, was stunned. He said, Boss, you are really a god. You only came to the Summer world for 2 days, but you are already surrounded by beautiful women. Only then did Xian Miao Miao notice Jean de Bayo. She was shocked by the latter's body size, and her beautiful face turned pale. Little girl, don't look at this fatty's ordinary appearance. My stomach is full of goods. Jean de Bayo smiled at Xian Miao Miao and said with a smile. Nietian glanced angrily at Jean de Bayo before introducing the latter to Han Tian. Xian Miao Miao was very similar to Qiu Linger. Jean de Bayo liked her type. Miao Miao, for the next month, I want you to cultivate together with Han Tian and de Bayo. Is that okay? Nietian did not stand on ceremony and directly said, Yes. Xian Miao Miao glanced at Jean de Bayo and frowned. Finally, she nodded and said, I will listen to big brother Nietian. All right. Nietian faintly smiled and said, Han Tian and de Bayo, both of you can't leave your Jade Mansion, so you two will cultivate in your Jade Mansion. Then, Nietian asked Xian Miao Miao to take out the spiritual array scroll. A level 7 spirit gathering formation scroll was a gift from her royal brother, Xian Xiao. Nietian asked Yu Jiao to arrange a secluded place for Xian Miao Miao and the others. For the next month, Xian Miao Miao and the others cultivated in this courtyard. Opening the spiritual array scroll, a vast array power suddenly surged out. Endless runes spread out, and in the blink of an eye, a spirit gathering formation with a circumference of tens of meters appeared in front of everyone. A level 7 spirit gathering formation is indeed not bad. Nietian sensed the strength of the spirit gathering formation, and the corner of his mouth raised into a satisfied smile. A level 7 spirit gathering formation had a very good effect of gathering the heaven and earth spiritual energy. Martial artists cultivating in the formation would be 10 times faster than the outside world. The heaven and earth spiritual energy in the Summer world was originally more abundant than in the 3,000 small worlds. Adding the effect of the spirit gathering formation, this kind of cultivation speed was more than 100 times faster than in the 3,000 small worlds. Cultivating in the formation for a day was equivalent to cultivating in the 3,000 small worlds for a year. This was the superiority of cultivation resources. It was easy for those big families to produce geniuses, and this was inseparable from the sufficient cultivation resources. You guys enter the spiritual array. The spiritual array opened, and Nietian let Xian Miao, Han Tian, and Jean de Bayo enter the spiritual array. The 3 of them entered the spiritual array, and immediately felt the heaven and earth spiritual energy crazily rush into their bodies. This kind of feeling was indescribably comfortable. The 3 of them sat cross-legged in the spiritual array and quickly entered the state of cultivation. Phew! Nietian let out a long breath. The next part was the most crucial part. The spirit gathering formation could only gather the heaven and earth spiritual energy, but did not have any effect on the growth of mental power. What Xian Miao needed now was not to increase her strength, but to increase her mental power. Ancient Pill Cauldron. I wonder what the effect is when refining spiritual materials and spiritual medicines. At this time, Nietian took out a pill cauldron. It was one of the 10 great ancient pill cauldrons, the 3-legged profound cauldron. And this pill cauldron is in your hands. Yu Jiao, of course, recognized the 3-legged pill cauldron. When she saw Nietian take it out, she could not help but be stunned. Old man who gave it to me. Nietian smiled faintly. With a wave of his arm, the 3-legged profound cauldron flew up and floated in midair. Yu Jiao frowned slightly. What was the relationship between Huijia and Nietian? Even a 3-legged profound cauldron was given to him. Nietian did not care too much about it. With a step, his figure shot up into the sky and stood beside the 3-legged profound cauldron. Let's begin. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled into a smile. With another wave of his arm, countless spiritual materials and spiritual medicines appeared and floated above the pill cauldron. These were the spiritual materials that he had bought at the Yu clan's auction house. He is an alchemist? Yu Jiao looked at Nie Tian's posture and could not help but tremble. She did not expect Nie Tian to be an alchemist in addition to his heaven-defying strength. At this time, Nie Tian's 5 fingers spewed out flames, and the pill cauldron gradually became scorching hot. With rapt attention, Nie Tian started refining the spiritual materials and spirit medicines. Under Yu Jiao's astonished gaze, the spiritual materials and spiritual medicines turned into balls of spiritual liquid. What a terrifying fire control technique. Yu Jiao was dumbfounded. She had seen alchemists concoct pills before, and even those rank 5 and rank 6 alchemists were far from being comparable to Nie Tian. In her heart, Nie Tian became more and more mysterious and unpredictable. After a while, Nie Tian controlled the balls of spiritual liquid and slowly integrated them into the rank 7 spirit gathering formation. With the continuous integration of the spiritual liquid, the spirit gathering formation actually began to release a strong spiritual wave. Yu Jiao was completely stunned and looked at the scene in front of her with her eyes and mouth wide open. She had never seen a spiritual formation that could release spiritual wave. At this time, Nie Tian's figure landed, and his divine sense felt the spiritual wave within the spiritual formation. He said, "The spiritual wave is here, but it is not enough to improve my spiritual power. Next, I will have to rely on the heaven-covering totem." The spiritual materials and spiritual medicines were all used to restore spiritual power, so it was not surprising that they could produce spiritual waves in the spiritual formation. However, it was far from enough to improve the spiritual power of Xian Miao Miao and the others with only these spiritual materials. Next, Nie Tian was going to use the heaven-covering totem. His body slightly shook, and a big net made of starlight appeared behind Nie Tian. It was the heaven-covering totem. Yu Jiao's body trembled slightly, as if she had been electrocuted. She quickly took a few steps back and was extremely shocked. She felt a vast and endless power from the heaven-covering totem. This kind of power shocked her, made her awe, and even made her despair. The power in Nie Tian's body was getting stronger and stronger. Yu Jiao didn't know how to describe Nie Tian. Boom! The next moment, Nie Tian controlled the heaven-covering totem and slowly rolled it up. Like a curtain, it wrapped the whole spirit-gathering formation. Chapter 792. Seeing the spirit-gathering array shaking, Nie Tian didn't panic. Instead, he was very calm. The totem wanted to merge with the spirit-gathering array, but it would inevitably be repelled by the spirit-gathering array. It was normal for the spirit-gathering array to shake. Nie Tian's body slowly poured out the power of the stars. After shaking for a while, the spirit-gathering array gradually calmed down. The starlight on the totem slowly merged with the spirit-gathering array. The power of the stars could greatly improve one's spiritual power. This was something Nie Tian already knew. The reason why his spiritual power could improve so quickly was because of the awakening of the power of the stars. After a long time, the starlight on the totem completely merged with the spirit-gathering array. The spirit-gathering array was wrapped in a layer of starlight, dazzling and dazzling. Yu Jiao was already dumbfounded. If she didn't see it with her own eyes, she wouldn't believe that there was someone in this world with such extraordinary ability. At this time, Nie Tian withdrew the totem. The power of the stars in his body was basically exhausted. He let out a long breath, and the corners of his mouth rose confidently. He murmured, "The spirit liquid in the spirit-gathering array will transform the power of the stars into spiritual power. As long as they absorb this spiritual power, within a month, the 3 of them will be able to improve their spiritual power by about 10 levels. 10 levels of spiritual power in a month." Hearing Nie Tian's words, Yu Jiao directly cried out. Although she didn't specialize in spiritual power, she also knew the difficulty of cultivating spiritual power. Generally speaking, Those who could improve their psychic power by 1 level in a year would already be regarded as geniuses in terms of psychic power. However, Nietian had just casually improved the psychic power of 3 people by 10 levels in a month. Nietian's words simply subverted Yu Jiao's understanding. Nietian didn't care too much. He directly took a few foundation pill and told Yu Jiao that no one was allowed to enter this courtyard for a month. Yu Jiao nodded. Even if Nietian didn't order, she wouldn't let anyone near the courtyard. Everything here was too strange and would scare people. Next, Nietian and Yu Jiao left the courtyard. Big brother Nietian, you need to rest, Yu Jiao said with concern when she saw Nietian's tired face. I'm not in a hurry to rest. I want to see a big show first. Nietian faintly smiled and then walked toward the gate of his jade mansion. Drama? Yu Jiao was taken aback for a moment before she hurriedly followed after them. Just as Nietian and Yu Jiao left the jade mansion, at the same time, in the Crown Prince's mansion. Xian Xiao, get out here! An explosive roar rang out in the air as 2 figures descended, bringing with them a dense and oppressive aura as they pressed towards the Crown Prince's residence. 2 silhouettes, 1 male and 1 female. The male's white hair fluttered in the wind, while the female was incomparably bewitching. They were none other than Mo Biming and his first direct disciple, Yuhua. How dare you intrude into the Crown Prince's palace? You're courting death. Immediately, more than a dozen black figures from the Crown Prince's residence soared into the sky, directly surrounding the 2 figures in the air. A bunch of ants courting death. Mo Biming sneered as his aura spread out. Instantly, an incomparably domineering energy filled the air, rushing out in all directions. The sky was filled with ghostly wails and wolf howls. The dozen black figures were directly sent flying, dripping blood splattering in the sky. The huge commotion in the sky immediately attracted many people to stop and watch. The crowd looked at the domineering figure in the sky, their eyes trembling as they discussed in low voices. Who is this old man? How dare he come to the Crown Prince's residence to kill people? This person is so strong. The guards of the Crown Prince's residence are all heavenly evolution realm warriors, yet they can't withstand the impact of his aura. This is too terrifying. This old man is definitely a heaven realm warrior. Crown Prince Xian Xiao has offended this guy. There's going to be a good show to watch. In reality, Mo Biming looked very young. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s, but his hair was white, so people would think that he was an old man. Xian Xiao, get out here! Mo Biming directly killed more than a dozen guards of the Crown Prince's residence, but he was still not satisfied. His eyes suddenly flashed, and he ruthlessly slammed his palm down. Boom! The powerful palm pressed down on the gate of the Crown Prince's residence like a collapsing mountain. The entire gate was instantly razed to the ground, and a deep pit appeared in the ground. Sand and stones shot up dozens of meters into the sky, and it took a long time for them to fall back down. Mo Biming's anger was slightly alleviated after he smashed the gate of the Crown Prince's residence. Teacher, we haven't seen Xian Xiao in person yet. It's not good to kill him first, Yuhua said in a low voice. I, the Biming Monarch, have dominated for half my life. I'm not afraid of anyone. However, Mo Biming was extremely domineering and fearless. He roared, Xian Xiao, get out here right now. If you don't give me an explanation today, even if Xian Tianluo comes personally, he won't be able to save you. Xian Tianluo was the name of the Xianyu Emperor. Who is this person? How dare he call the Emperor by his name? He's too arrogant. The crowd's eyes trembled as they looked at Mo Biming with unconcealable fear. Everyone said that Crown Prince Xian Xiao was crazy, but this Mo Biming was even crazier. He had actually killed his way into the Crown Prince's residence and called the Emperor by his name. At the end of the day, whether one was crazy or not was determined by one's strength. Xian Xiao was crazy, but he was crazy in front of those who were not as strong as him. When faced with someone like Huojia, he had to tuck his tail between his legs. Mo Biming did not take Xian Xiao seriously at all, so he naturally dared to be insolent. At this moment, a figure flew out of the crown prince's residence. It was an old man in green robes. His face was livid. He came before Mo Biming, cupped his hands, and said, "Who are you? How dare you come to the crown prince's residence and cause trouble? The crown prince is in seclusion and has no time to see you." "Chief Steward Liu," the crowd exclaimed in unison when they saw the old man's face. This old man was none other than the chief steward of the crown prince's residence, Liu Jinfeng. As the chief steward of the crown prince's residence, Liu Jinfeng usually looked askance at others. However, in front of Mo Biming, he had to appear calm and did not dare to be too arrogant. Scram! Mo Biming did not give Liu Jinfeng a chance to speak. He raised his arm, and a destructive force blasted out. Bang! There was a muffled sound. Before Liu Jinfeng could react, he was blasted into the ground. A large pit appeared in the ground, and sand and stones flew tens of meters into the air. Liu Jinfeng lay in the pit, his body a bloody mess. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. F*CK. Chief Steward Liu has been beaten to death. The crowd trembled violently when they saw this scene. Many of them revealed looks of joy. Liu Jinfeng was also a tyrant in Mystic Moon City. He usually relied on Xian Zhao's strength to bully others and commit all sorts of evil deeds. Now that he had been beaten half to death with a single move, it was really satisfying. "Xian Zhao, I will count to 3. If you do not come out by then, I will flatten your crown prince's residence." When Mo Biming did not see Xian Zhao, he let out a deep roar. His aura soared, and his murderous intent filled the air. 1. In the next moment, Mo Biming began to count. His deep voice sounded like the knell of the Grim Reaper, carrying with it a vast and oppressive aura. 2. A second voice rang out. Mo Biming looked down at the crown prince's residence, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Unfortunately, Crown Prince Xian Zhao still did not appear. Chapter 793. Mo Biming counted to 3, but Xian Zhao was still nowhere to be seen. Without any hesitation, Mo Biming struck the crown prince's residence with his palm. Boom! In the air, a powerful palm force wreaked havoc. A palm shadow that was hundreds of meters wide appeared. The space trembled and dark clouds howled as it pressed down. Boom! The gigantic palm descended onto the ground, and a huge amount of power spread out in all directions. Immediately, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The entire ground shook violently, and a turbid wave of air spread out in all directions. Wherever it went, the houses were all destroyed and turned into ruins. Looking down from the sky, it was possible to see a huge palm print in the middle of the crown prince's mansion. Mo Biming was in the 5th rank of the celestial being realm. The power of his palm could shake the heavens and destroy everything. The crowd's eyes were filled with shock. Mo Biming was too arrogant. After counting to 3, he struck without hesitation. His dominance was terrifying. "Xian Zhao, are you still not coming out?" When the palm landed, Mo Biming's eyes were not filled with satisfaction, but anger. If Xian Zhao still did not come out, he would really destroy the entire crown prince's residence. At the same time, in a secret place in the crown prince's residence, a figure hurried out of a room. It was Xian Zhao. Xian Zhao's entire body was surging with terrifying anger. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was obviously furious. He was cultivating in seclusion, but he did not expect someone to cause trouble in the crown prince's residence. He was the crown prince of the Black Moon Empire. In the Black Moon Empire, only he could attack others. How could he allow others to attack him? "Your Highness the Crown Prince, that person is too terrifying. He killed the head butler." An old man hurriedly ran over and wailed in grief. Mo Biming's palm had killed the head butler, Liu Jinfeng. "Bastard!" Xian Zhao roared. He stomped on the ground and shot up into the sky. A powerful aura surged out as if it was going to tear the sky apart. In the sky above the crown prince's residence, Xian Zhao appeared a few hundred meters away from Mo Biming. "Your Highness, it's the crown prince." The crowd's eyes lit up when they saw Xian Zhao. Subconsciously, They all hoped that Xian Xiao and Mo Biming would fight. In the crowd, a figure retracted his aura and wore a playful expression as he looked at the figures in the sky with great interest. This person was none other than Ye Tian. A figure stood beside Ye Tian. It was Yu Jiao. Yu Jiao looked at Crown Prince Xian Xiao, her eyes trembling violently. She finally understood what Ye Tian meant when he said he wanted to watch a show. At the Bloodbath Arena, Ye Tian had taken out Xian Zhao's Crown Prince token. It wasn't strange that Mo Biming and the others had found the Crown Prince's residence. But what Yu Jiao couldn't understand was why Ye Tian had the Crown Prince's token. Could it be? Yu Jiao suddenly thought of a person, and her expression changed. She couldn't help but look at Ye Tian. I killed Dao Quangxing. Ye Tian's lips twitched as he said in a low voice, his face calm and composed. Gulp. Yu Jiao gulped. Her delicate face was petrified. Ye Tian ignored Yu Jiao and stared at Xian Xiao and Mo Biming. If Mo Biming could kill Xian Xiao in one move, the show would be even more interesting. You are Xian Xiao? Mo Biming asked coldly as he stared at Xian Xiao. Who are you? We don't know each other. Why did you kill my people and destroy my residence? Xian Xiao suppressed the anger in his heart because he sensed that Mo Biming was actually a fifth-layer sky human. He was no match for him. Take a palm strike for me first. Mo Biming sneered and the aura around his body surged. Black mist rose from his body and an extremely sinister aura filled the air. Xian Zhao's eyes narrowed and his expression became nervous. The yuan meridians in his body began to churn, and black blood, feather mystical sand appeared around him, surging with terrifying bloodline power. Bloodline power? A cold light flashed in Mo Biming's eyes. He said coldly, I have long wanted to see the Xian family's bloodline power. I hope you won't disappoint me. As his cold and emotionless voice fell, Mo Biming's eyes flashed with killing intent. He knew that Xian Xiao was one of the 9 demons like his son, Mo Youshang. Moreover, Xian Zhao's ranking was higher than Mo Youshang's, ranking second among the 9 demons. If he could kill Xian Xiao, not only would he be able to take revenge, but he would also be able to raise Mo Youshang's ranking. Teacher, you can't. Yu Hua sensed Mo Biming's killing intent, and her expression changed. No matter what, Xian Xiao was the crown prince of the Black Moon Empire. If Mo Biming killed him without any explanation, it would be equivalent to declaring war with the Black Moon Empire. The consequences would be unimaginable. I can't. Mo Biming had made up his mind to kill. He roared coldly and struck out with his palm. The dark north demonic chi around him surged, and a destructive force descended, rolling towards Xian Xiao. Oh no! Xian Zhao's eyes widened slightly as he exclaimed. He knew that he would not be able to block Mo Biming's palm the moment he threw it out. Although he knew that he could not block it, Xian Xiao still wanted to put up a desperate resistance. All the blood jade mystic sand in his body surged out, forming a layer of mystic sand shield around him. At that moment, the destructive palm came crashing down. Boundless palm power wreaked havoc in the space, as if it was going to destroy the space. Boom! The powerful palm force was enough to destroy heaven and earth. It landed directly on Xian Xiao, and the mystic sand shield around him was instantly torn apart. In the next moment, the terrifying palm power turned into demonic chi and invaded Xian Zhao's body. His skin was torn inch by inch, and his entire body was about to be torn into pieces. His body was invaded by the demonic chi, and a sharp pain spread throughout his body. Xian Xiao could not bear the pain and screamed. Bang! With a dull sound, Xian Zhao's body flew backward in the air. A glaring line of blood appeared in the air. My son Xian Xiao. At that moment, a roar sounded and a figure appeared strangely in the void. It turned into a stream of light and shot out, hugging Xian Xiao. Father! Xian Xiao lay in the man's arms and called out weakly, then fainted. Shower! The man roared mournfully and hurriedly injected a stream of yuan qi into Xian Zhao's body. The latter's complexion finally improved a little, but he was still unconscious. Xian Shao called this man father, so the identity of this man was very clear. He was the emperor of the Black Moon Empire, Xian Tianluo. It's His Majesty the Emperor. Someone in the crowd recognized Xian Tianluo and exclaimed, his face shocked to the extreme. Something had happened in the Crown Prince's residence, and the Emperor had come in person. Chapter 794. The development of the situation was beyond Nie Tian's expectations. He didn't expect Mo Biming to be so irritable. He didn't care about anything at all. It just bombarded Xian Shao. In the end, even Xian Shao was seriously injured by him. Nie Tian liked Mo Biming's character. On the other hand, Nie Tian didn't expect Xian Yu's emperor to appear in person. It seemed that the show had to continue. At that moment, Nie Tian unleashed his divine sense. Then, the corner of his mouth rose as he thought to himself, 19th Highness, you're here. How could Xian Xiu, who was very close to the Crown Prince, not come to watch such a big thing happen in the Crown Prince's residence? Nie Tian moved and came to Xian Xiu's side. Nie Tian. Xian Xiu sensed Nie Tian's arrival and couldn't help but be surprised. 19th Highness, you look a little regretful. Nie Tian looked at Xian Xiu and smiled playfully. Xian Xiu's eyes were burning, but he was a little unwilling. It was a pity that Mo Biming didn't kill Xian Shao. He was even more unhappy that Xian Yu's emperor appeared at this time. In this way, Xian Zhao's life was saved. Xian Xiu asked himself, if something happened to his Qiu palace, would Xian Yu's emperor come in person? Unconsciously, Xian Xiu always compares Xian Shao to himself. Do you know what's going on? Xian Xiu saw the strange look in Nie Tian's eyes. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt that Xian Zhao's inexplicable disaster had something to do with Nie Tian. Yes, Nie Tian nodded and didn't explain too much to Xian Xiu. Instead, he said, 19th Highness, if you want to get rid of Xian Shao completely, you have to put on a show with me. Say it. Xian Xiu's eyes lit up when he heard Nie Tian's words. He was obviously interested. As long as he could get rid of Xian Shao, he would do anything. Xian Shao, my son. In the void, Xian Tianluo held Xian Shao. He suddenly sensed that the latter's primordial spirit was wrapped by a strange power and seemed to be sealed. His heart ached, and he hated himself for not coming earlier. Xian Tianluo, long time no see. At this time, Mo Biming took a step forward. He did not panic because of Xian Tianluo's arrival. Instead, he looked at him with a playful expression. Mo Biming. Xian Tianluo suddenly raised his head and stared at Mo Biming. He suppressed his anger and said, my Xian family has no enmity with you. Why did you do this to my son? No enmity? Mo Biming smiled coldly and said, before last night, this king was indeed on good terms with your Xian family. Unfortunately, last night, Crown Prince Xian Shao sent someone to wreak havoc in my blood death ground. Not only did he kill countless of my guards, even my son, Mo Shang, almost died at his hands. What's even more infuriating is that he released all the slaves from the blood death ground. I came here today to demand an explanation from Xian Shao, but he refused to come out to see me. I had no choice but to attack him. As soon as Cold's voice fell, it immediately set off an uproar in the crowd. Many people knew of the existence of the blood death ground, and they also knew that it was a forbidden area in the imperial city. Ordinary people did not dare to enter. However, no one had expected that Crown Prince Xian Shao would actually send someone to wreak havoc in the blood death ground, and he even succeeded. Otherwise, Mo Biming would not be so angry. Nie Tian, it's you. Xian Xiu heard Mo Biming's words and looked at Nie Tian in surprise. There was no doubt that the person Mo Biming was talking about who wreaked havoc in the blood death ground was Nie Tian. Just think of it as me framing Xian Shao. Of course, Nie Tian knew what Xian Xiu was thinking. He smiled faintly and said, 19th Highness, you must remember to cooperate with me. Xian Xiu nodded. He always felt that ever since he met Nie Tian, he had been led by the nose. Bullshit. Xian Tianluo did not believe Mo Biming at all and roared. Xian Shao has no enmity with the blood death ground. Why did he send people to wreak havoc in the blood death ground? Mo Biming, Don't think that just because you are Lord Biming, you can frame my son at will. Frame? Mo Biming smiled cold, then threw out a token and said coldly, "This token was left by the man last night. Crown Prince token." Xian Tianluo took the token and looked at it. It was indeed Xian Zhao's Crown Prince token. "Xian Tianluo, what else do you have to say?" Mo Biming smiled coldly and said, "That man is called Nietan, a silver-haired martial artist. He made a scene in the Blood Death ground. Let the slaves go and injure my son. I must take him away today." Nietian, Xian Tianluo, was slightly stunned. He had never heard of this name. However, since he could get Xian Zhao's Crown Prince token, he must be very close to Xian Zhao. "People of the Crown Prince Palace, come out!" Xian Tianluo roared. He must find out what was going on. "Your Majesty, there is no need to shout." At this moment, a calm voice sounded, and a figure appeared in the void with an indifferent expression. It was Nietian. When Mo Biming and Yuehua saw Nietian's silver hair, their faces darkened, and they exclaimed in unison, "A silver-haired martial artist!" Both of them were stunned for a moment. They did not expect that the person who made a scene in the Blood Death ground would be so young. He looked less than 20 years old. What was even more strange was that Nietian's strength was only at the 4th level of heavenly evolution. A 4th-level heavenly evolution martial artist killed so many guards of the Blood Death ground, and even Mo Yoshang almost died at his hands. Was this possible? Mo Biming and Yuehua could not understand. They could not imagine how Nietian did it. At this moment, the crowd saw Nietian's face clearly, and their eyes trembled violently. Many people had recognized him and were discussing him. "It's Nietian. Yes, it's him. He fought with Crown Prince Xian Zhao at the Weapon Refinery Association yesterday. Could he be Crown Prince Xian Zhao's man? How strange. Isn't he a match for Crown Prince Xian Zhao?" Nietian shook his head slightly. He did not care about the crowd's discussion. Instead, he looked at Mo Biming and Yuehua with a calm expression and said, "The person you are looking for is me." His voice was very calm, as if he was chatting about family matters. However, there was a palpitating indifference in it. "Nietian, you injure my son." When Mo Biming saw Nietian, his entire body was filled with rage. A violent aura burst forth, covering the sky and covering the earth as it pressed towards Nietian. Nietian's body trembled slightly. He activated the Sword of Divine Wheel and directly dispelled Mo Biming's oppressive aura. Although Mo Biming was at the 5th level of the heaven-human realm, and his strength was more than a major realm higher than Nietian, it was impossible for him to use his aura to seriously injure Nietian. "Mo Biming, don't be too arrogant." At this moment, Xian Tianluo stepped forward and stood between Nietian and Mo Biming. He said coldly, "No one is allowed to touch this person before the matter is clarified." Nietian was slightly surprised. He did not expect Xian Tianluo to step forward to protect him. Chapter 795. Nietian could feel Xian Tianluo's anger. If he couldn't explain the whole thing, Xian Tianluo would kill him without Mo Biming's help. Taking a deep breath, Nietian's expression was still indifferent as he unhurriedly recounted what happened at the Blood Death field last night. He basically told everything truthfully, but the reason he entered the Blood Death field was to help Crown Prince Xian Zhao find a cultivator to enter the forbidden land of wind and cloud. "So, you really are Xian Zhao's subordinate?" Xian Tianluo looked at Nietian maliciously, as if trying to see if the latter was lying. In fact, Xian Tianluo was already 70 to 80% convinced. Since Nietian knew about the forbidden land of wind and cloud, what he said was most likely true. In the entire Black Moon Empire, not many people knew about the art of wind and cloud. Crown Prince Xian Zhao and I only have a cooperative relationship. I helped him find candidates to participate in the art of wind and cloud. That's all, Nietian said indifferently, his eyes so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. Xian Tianluo stared fixedly at Nietian. He suddenly realized that he couldn't see through this silver-haired youth in front of him. Xian Tianluo had lived for more than 200 years and had seen countless people. He could guess most people with just a glance. But the strange thing was that he couldn't see through Nye Tian. The other party was like an unfathomable ocean. Xin Tianluo, did you hear that? This person is working for Crown Prince Xian Shao. I'm already being polite by not killing Crown Prince Xian Shao. Mo Biming said cold. He immediately locked his eyes on Nye Tian and said, Kid, Xian Shao asked you to go to the Blood Death field to choose a cultivator, not to cause trouble there. Why'd you let all the slaves go and hurt my son? What Nye Tian said was similar to what Mo Sorrow had said. The process was roughly the same. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, I've already said it. The people at the Blood Death field forced me to take action. Mo Sorrow broke the rules of the Blood Death field and intervened in the Blood Death martial battle. I had no choice but to hurt him. If you don't believe me, you can ask the spectators at the Bloody Death arena. HM, Mo Biming's eyes darkened as he asked, Then why did you release the slaves from the Blood Death ground? Sorrow Mo wants to kill me, so of course I'm angry. But in a moment of anger, I'll do whatever I want. Nye Tian raised his brows and smiled provocatively. He could tell that Crown Prince Xian Shao had been poisoned by Mo Biming's dark north demonic aura and would probably be in a coma for the rest of his life. Hence, whatever Mo Biming said now was the truth. Brat, you're going to lose your life if you talk to me like that. The corners of Mo Biming's mouth curled into a cold smile, his face revealing a dense, killing intent. He immediately turned to look at Xian Tianluo and said indifferently, Xian Tianluo, now the matter is clear. This kid confessed to everything that happened last night. As for Crown Prince Xian Shao, he was guilty of allowing his subordinates to act recklessly. But I saw that he was already unconscious, so I let it go. I'm going to take this kid away now. You don't have any objections, do you? Xian Tianluo's face was as gloomy as dripping water. He could sense that Xian Shao was seriously injured. If he didn't have any heaven-defying means, it would be difficult for him to wake up. Xian Shao was injured like this, and his heart was bleeding. But Mo Biming was very strong, not inferior to him. More importantly, Mo Biming was the Dark North King, and behind him was an unusually powerful force, the Heavenly Demon Cult. The Heavenly Demon Cult was not something the Black Moon Empire could offend. Xian Tianluo looked at Xian Shao in his arms, his eyes trembling. The enemy who injured his son was right in front of him, but Xian Tianluo didn't dare to make a move. This kind of feeling was like a knife twisting in his heart. At a certain moment, Xian Tianluo suddenly looked at Nye Tian, his eyes full of killing intent. He didn't dare to offend Mo Biming, so he blamed everything on Nye Tian. If it weren't for Nye Tian messing around, he wouldn't have angered Mo Biming. If Nye Tian had appeared a little earlier, Xian Shao wouldn't have been so seriously injured. All of this was Nye Tian's doing. Xian Tianluo couldn't wait to kill Nye Tian with his own hands. So how could he stop Mo Biming from taking him away? No problem, Xian Tianluo responded coldly. Father. However, at this moment, a voice rang out, and Xian Xiu's figure appeared in midair. Xiua. When Xian Tianluo saw Xian Xiu appear, his eyes lit up slightly, and his sorrowful expression slightly improved. Fortunately, the Xian family still had Xian Xiu. Otherwise, once something happened to Xian Shao, the Xian family would have no successor. Father, you can't let him take Nye Tian away. Xian Xiu's figure flashed, and he came to Xian Tianluo's side and said solemnly, Why? Xian Tianluo was slightly taken aback, and he looked at Nye Tian rather strangely. It was reasonable to say that Nye Tian was Xian Zhao's man, so he should be hostile to Xian Xiu. Why did Xian Xiu still save him? Father, you don't know. The reason why Nye Tian went to the Blood Death field last night was because he was instructed by me and my brother, the Crown Prince. Xian Xiu's face was calm, and he said solemnly, Xiu, your words are making me more and more confused. Can you explain it more clearly? Xian Tianluo looked at Xian Xiu, but the more he listened, the more confused he became. Xian Xiu nodded and said, Father, in 2 months, the wind and cloud art will open. I have discussed with my brother, the Crown Prince, that we will jointly select 10 warriors to enter the wind and cloud forbidden land. This time, our Xian family must obtain the inheritance from the wind and cloud forbidden land. Then, Xian Xiao made a sharp statement, directly saying that he and Xian Xiao were cooperating and that he saw in Nie Tian's strength, so he let him be fully responsible for the wind and cloud art. In the end, Xian Xiao said, "Father, I have thought about it. This time, I will enter the wind and cloud art with Mr. Nie Tian. I believe that with Mr. Nie Tian's strength, he will definitely help me obtain the inheritance." What? Hearing this, Xian Tianluo was suddenly stunned and said in astonishment, "You want to enter the wind and cloud forbidden land?" "Yes." Xian Xiao nodded and said, "Father, Mr. Nie Tian's strength is beyond imagination. With him, we will definitely be able to leave the wind and cloud forbidden land safely." Beyond imagination? Xian Tianluo looked at Nie Tian suspiciously and said coldly, "A fourth-level heavenly evolution martial artist is worthy of being called beyond imagination." Nie Tian stood where he was, not saying anything. He had already discussed it with Xian Xiao. Whether or not he could persuade Xian Tianluo was Xian Xiao's business. Xian Xiao did not give up. He took a step forward and said, "Father, you still don't know, right? 2 days ago, Mr. Nie Tian defeated the Yun family's Yun Zong and crippled the latter. Yesterday at the Blacksmith's Guild, Mr. Nie Tian and my brother, the Crown Prince, fought to a draw. And last night, Mr. Nie Tian almost killed Mo Sorrow. With his 4th-level heavenly evolution strength, to be able to do this is beyond imagination." Hearing what Xian Xiao said, Xian Tianluo's brows became a little more solemn. He knew Yun Zong's strength, knew Xian Zhao's strength, and also knew that Mo Sorrow was the 3rd person among the 9 demons. If Nie Tian really did what Xian Xiao said, this strength was indeed beyond imagination. Chapter 796. Xian Tianluo didn't seem to hear Mo Biming's words. He looked at Nie Tian with burning eyes, his mind racing. If what Xian Xiao said just now was true, then Nie Tian was indeed a rare genius. Such a person might really be able to obtain the inheritance if he entered the forbidden land of wind and cloud. The forbidden land of wind and cloud was an ancient ruin, and the inheritance inside was very terrifying. If Xian Xiao could obtain the ancient inheritance with his talent, his strength would certainly have a qualitative leap. Perhaps the entire Xian family would rise because of Xian Xiao, and the Xian family might even become a superforce like the Holy Light Dynasty. Thinking of this, Xian Tianluo's eyes became hot. At this moment, he was tempted. "Your Majesty." At this time, Nie Tian suddenly spoke. He looked at Xian Tianluo with a strange look in his eyes and said lightly, "Your Majesty, if you don't believe in my strength, I can prove it to you." "How?" Xian Tianluo's body shook, unable to conceal his excitement. "Use him to prove it." Nie Tian suddenly turned around, his eyes locked on Mo Biming, and said lightly, "Dark North King, your strength is at the 5th level of the heaven-human realm. Just now, you seriously injured Prince Xian Xiao with one palm, but I don't think your palm can hurt me." "Huh?" Mo Biming's eyes darkened. He suddenly felt as if he had been slapped in the face in public, and his face burned hot. Dark North King was a martial artist at the 5th level of the heaven-human realm. Even in the entire Shumi world, he was also a powerhouse. Now that he was provoked by a young man, how could he not be angry? "Fine." Seeing that Mo Biming was about to explode, Xian Tianluo laughed and said loudly, "Mo Biming, are you willing to fight with Nie Tian? Brat, you're courting death." Mo Biming felt as if there were countless maggots biting his chest, making his whole body unspeakably uncomfortable. "Dark North King, let's decide the winner with one move. If you lose, the matter of the blood death field will end here. If I lose, I'll go with you. How about it?" Nie Tian looked at Mo Biming lightly and said in a deep voice, "Hiss." The crowd gasped when they heard Nie Tian's words. Was Nie Tian crazy? Challenging a 5th-level heaven being martial artist with 4th-level heaven evolution strength. This was simply courting death. The crowd was certain that Nietian must have lost his mind. Mo Biming's divine sense swept through Nietian, and he was actually confirming the latter's strength. After that, his face sank as he roared furiously. Good. If you want to play, I, Dark North King, will play with you. Although Mo Biming was hot-tempered, he wasn't a fool. Nietian clearly wasn't the kind of person who would seek death. If he dared to challenge him like this, he must have something up his sleeves. Moreover, since Nietian was able to injure Sorrow Mo, his strength was not to be underestimated. Teacher, I feel a strange power in this boy's body. Yuhua stared at Nietian. She seemed to have sensed something and reminded Mo Biming in a low voice. Mo Biming nodded solemnly. He took a step into the air and rose another 10 meters. Nietian also stepped through the air, rising into the air until he was several hundred meters away from Mo Biming. Stinking brat, I don't care what method you used to injure my son. Since you met me today, you must die. Mo Biming's expression was solemn, and his voice was cold. The aura around his body surged, and the dark north demonic chi filled the air for several hundred meters, enveloping his entire body. He was like a dark demon god that had walked out of hell. The aura of a fifth-level sky human martial artist is indeed powerful. Nietian felt the aura surging towards him, and his gaze involuntarily tightened. A fifth-level sky human martial artist. Nietian had fought with Liu Lai before. Judging from the aura alone, Mo Biming's strength should be below Liu Li's. Facing Mo Biming's soaring aura, Nietian's face didn't reveal fear, but a strange smile. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the two of them. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, and their eyes didn't even blink. Nietian, don't disappoint me. Xian Xiu felt that his heart had already jumped to his throat. If Nietian was killed by Mo Biming with one palm, then everything would be for naught. Silver hair brat, I want to see just how strong you are. Xian Tianluo looked at Nietian's figure with an equally nervous expression. He was the same as Mo Biming. Both were fifth-level sky human. Xian Tianluo thought that even if he fought with Mo Biming, he wouldn't have the confidence to win. Nietian was merely a fourth-level sky evolution. Where did he get his confidence from? Nietian held his breath and focused. His figure stood in the air, forming a strange seal with his hands. Then, the power of heaven and earth changed. The space seemed to be distorted by an invisible force, tilting toward Nietian. Endless spiritual power of heaven and earth surged into Nietian's body. Nietian seemed to have become a black hole that absorbed the spiritual power of heaven and earth. The spiritual power of heaven and earth within several thousand meters was gathering toward him. Mo Biming felt the power of the space around him change slightly. A trace of astonishment flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled coldly and said, Brat, you really have some tricks up your sleeve. You're not strong enough, so you want to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, you're too weak. Even if you absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth within 10,000 meters, you definitely won't be able to contend against me. The spiritual power of heaven and earth was very limited. Even if Nietian absorbed all the spiritual power of heaven and earth within 10,000 meters, it would be far from being able to make up for the gap between him and Mo Biming. Brat died. Mo Biming sneered and no longer hesitated. All the power in his body surged out. Endless dark north demonic energy instantly condensed into a giant black hand that was nearly 1,000 meters wide in the air. Mo Biming used all his strength in this palm. It was even more terrifying than the palm that had landed on Xian Xiao. Boom! In the air, raging dark clouds surged over. The space within a few thousand meters was shrouded by the dark north demonic energy, turning everything into darkness. In the vast darkness, Nietian stood tall in the air. His figure was like a sword. At this moment, the power of heaven and earth around him suddenly pressed down. Combined with the divine wheel sword, it blossomed violently in the air. Unfortunately, such power was still too weak in front of Mo Biming. Spiritual Dragon Seal. It's all up to you now. Borrowing the power of heaven and earth, Tian moved his mind, and the spirit dragon ring immediately sensed it. At this moment, the spirit dragon ring suddenly flashed. Endless dragon energy filled the air, and a huge dragon might surged out. An emerald dragon shadow condensed. The emerald dragon shadow condensed in the air. After absorbing a large amount of sealing power, the emerald dragon's body had already grown to a size of 30 meters. This was all the power that the emerald dragon had absorbed during this period of time. The emerald dragon was completely solid. Its dragon body, dragon scales, dragon horns, dragon claws, every part of it was vivid and lifelike. The emerald dragon's body rolled in the air. Suddenly, endless dragon energy surged out, and the surrounding dark north demonic energy actually dimmed a little. Tian stepped on the emerald dragon and charged straight at Mo Biming. The moment he saw Mo Biming's figure clearly, starlight flashed in his eyes. Absolute tremor was activated, and a powerful spiritual deterrent was instantly released. Chapter 797. In the void, absolute tremor was activated. Tian's eyes released a massive spiritual deterrence that penetrated the demonic energy of the northern underworld and enveloped Mo Biming. At that moment, Mo Biming suddenly felt his divine soul tremble. He could lose control of his mind at any moment. The powerful demonic energy around him disappeared. What a powerful dragon energy! When the crowd saw the dark demonic energy disappear and a figure appear on a green dragon, they could not help but tremble. This was true dragon energy. The dragon energy was vast and overwhelming. Mo Biming died. Tian stepped on the green dragon and moved as fast as lightning. He had forcibly changed the power of heaven and earth, not to borrow the spirit energy of heaven and earth, but to attract Mo Biming's attention. At the same time, he opened up a spatial passage for himself. The power of heaven and earth changed. Tian's figure became even faster. In the blink of an eye, he was less than 10 meters away from Mo Biming. Destroy him! With a deep roar, the green dragon under Tian's feet rolled out. A majestic dragon aura wreaked havoc, causing the space around it to tremble. The huge dragon body was like a sword released from a bow as it charged towards Mo Biming. The moment the dragon energy spread, Mo Biming finally reacted, but it was too late. Bang! With a muffled sound, Mo Biming's body was sent flying. This! The crowd gasped when they saw this. They suddenly felt a chill run down their spines, and their hearts trembled. Tian actually sent Mo Biming flying. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, no one would have believed it. A 4th-level heavenly evolution warrior had sent a 5th-level heaven human warrior flying. This scene was too strange. Mo Biming was sent flying by the green dragon. His figure flew back hundreds of meters before he finally stabilized his body in the air. However, he was currently covered in blood and looked very wretched. Impossible! Mo Biming stood rooted to the ground. After a few seconds, he finally reacted and roared at the sky. He was a 5th-level heaven human warrior, but he had been sent flying by a 4th-level heavenly evolution warrior. This was absolutely intolerable humiliation. With a furious roar, Mo Biming's body trembled and the bloodstains on his body were swept away. A violent rage spread through the void. At the same time, Tian's body trembled slightly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Just now, he had forcefully rushed forward against the northern underworld demonic chi, and was injured quite badly. A warrior in the 5th level of the heaven realm is indeed powerful. Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and smiled bitterly. In order to resist Mo Biming's palm, not only had he used absolute tremor, he had also used Spirit Dragon Seal. It could be said that he had used his 2 most terrifying trump cards. Even so, he was still unable to injure Mo Biming. Mo Biming took on the green dragon's power head-on. Although it looked like he was in a sorry state, they were all superficial wounds. He was basically unharmed. The strength of a 5th-level heaven human martial artist was truly terrifying. Tian's absolute tremor had also become much stronger, but he had only been able to control Mo Biming for an instant. From this, it could be seen just how terrifying the latter was. It was no exaggeration to say that if the person who was fighting against Nye Tian was Sorrow Mo, the latter would definitely die. At this time, Xian Tianluo and Xian Xiu were stunned. Their gazes froze as they stared at Nye Tian. A name appeared in their minds at the same time: 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss. Nye Tian had just used the dragon ring, so he was obviously from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss. Nye Tian was from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss. This was something that Xian Tianluo had never dreamed of. No wonder. After a long while, Xian Tianluo reacted and let out a strange cry. He did not act like an emperor at all. If Nye Tian was from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss, then it made sense that his strength was so strange. The 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss was a behemoth comparable to the Holy Light dynasty. It was possible for such an organization to cultivate any kind of genius. Nye Tian, I want you dead. Mo Biming had also guessed Nye Tian's identity at this moment, but he did not care at all. With a roar, his figure swooped down and directly rushed toward Nye Tian. Danger! In an instant, the crowd let out a cry of alarm. No one had expected Mo Biming to attack again. Mo Biming, are you crazy? Xian Tianluo screamed. He wanted to take action, but it was too late. In the face of Mo Biming's crazy attack again, Nye Tian had no strength to resist at all. At this moment, even if he used the sky shrouding totem, it would be impossible for him to block Mo Biming's palm. However, there was no fear on Nye Tian's face. Instead, his face was calm. Old man, you've been watching for so long. Are you still not going to make a move? Suddenly, the corners of Nye Tian's mouth curled up into a smile, and he said lightly, "Huh." In the void, a surprised voice rang out. Immediately after, a smile appeared and said, "Boy, you actually found me." As the voice fell, a huge force appeared. The space around Nye Tian suddenly tightened. Immediately, endless black sand appeared and condensed into a giant black sand hand in the air. Mysterious blood jade sand. When Nye Tian saw this scene, his eyes narrowed. The person in the dark was someone from the Xianyue royal family. Just at the moment when he activated absolute tremor, his insight was exerted to the extreme, and he suddenly saw a person hiding in the void. This person hid very well. If it weren't for Nye Tian's starry eyes, it would have been impossible to discover his existence. However, Nye Tian did not expect that this person was actually someone from the Xianyue royal family. This person's strength was in the 7th heaven realm, stronger than Xian Tianluo. Who was he? Boom! In the void, two giant palms collided. Suddenly, the space trembled and the sky changed color. A majestic wave of air blasted out from the center of the collision, and a pale light appeared. It was the spatial folds formed by the distortion of space. The power of a martial artist in the 5th heaven realm and a martial artist in the 6th heaven realm was so strong that even space could not withstand it. The proud sword wings appeared behind Nye Tian, and his figure quickly retreated thousands of meters away. After a violent tremor, the space finally calmed down. Two figures appeared in front of everyone. One was Mo Biming, and the other was a short and fat old man in black. Who is that person? The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they all exclaimed. This person did not appear before, but at this time, it was as if he had appeared out of thin air. Nye Tian stood in the air, looking at the old man in black, and frowned slightly. This person's appearance was not shocking, but the aura around his body was very terrifying. Mysterious blood feather sand surged around his body, releasing a gloomy aura. Old ancestor! At this time, Xian Tianluo saw the face of the old man in black and exclaimed. The old man in black who suddenly appeared was none other than the Xian family's old ancestor, Xian Yi. Old ancestor? Xian Xiu was slightly stunned. He never knew that the Xian family had an old ancestor. When Nye Tian heard Xian Tianluo's voice, he immediately felt relieved. This old man was the Xian family's old ancestor, so it was reasonable that he was stronger than Xian Tianluo. These old ancestor-level characters usually did not come out. The reason they appeared today was mostly because of Xian Xiao. The Xian family's old ancestor was hidden in the void, and he must have seen everything that had happened. If Nietian had not withstood Mo Biming's palm just now, this old ancestor would not have made a move. Chapter 798. Who are you? Mo Biming stood in the air, looking at Xian Yi in astonishment, unable to hide the fear in his eyes. He could feel that Xian Yi had restrained his strength in that palm strike. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to stand here safely. Mo Biming didn't expect that there was someone stronger than Xian Tianluo in the Black Moon Empire. Are you the new Dark North Monarch? Xian Yi's eyes flashed as he asked coldly. So what if I am? Mo Biming felt like a little lamb in a wolf's den being stared at by Xian Yi. A deep sense of helplessness welled up in his heart. Dark North Monarch, you are even more shameless than Gue Shilang. Xian Yi shook his head slightly and said mockingly, You and Nietian had an agreement to decide the winner in one move. You were pushed back in that move, so you lost. Since you lost, you have to admit it. Yet you attacked again in front of everyone. You are a disgrace to the heavenly demon cult. Mo Biming's face turned red. He wanted to say something, but couldn't. The old man in front of him seemed to be quite familiar with the heavenly demon cult. He actually knew the previous Dark North Monarch, Gue Shilang. Who are you? Mo Biming forced himself to calm down and asked again. Xian Yi smiled coldly and said, Who I am is not important. What is important is that you must leave the Black Moon Empire. As for the Bloody Death Field, close it. His voice was calm, but it carried an inviolable overbearingness. Mo Biming stood rooted to the ground. His face was dark, and the muscles on his face twitched. Since Xian Yi dared to say this, he wasn't afraid of the heavenly demon cult's revenge. This time, Mo Biming was going to suffer a big loss. I will tell Gue Shilang about the Bloody Death Field. You should leave now, Xian Yi said calmly, but his eyes were suffocating. Mo Biming's body trembled. Nietian was not dead yet. If he left now, he would not be willing. Teacher, let's go. At this moment, Yuhua walked up and said in a low voice. Xian Yi looked at Yuhua and asked, You are from the Yu family? Yes. Yuhua nodded and looked strangely at Xian Yi. Xian Yi looked at Yuhua with a complicated expression. After a long while, he gently sighed and said, How is Yu Shuang? You know the leader? Moonlight did a double take, clearly not expecting the old man to know the name of the Sky Demon Cult Saint. Yuhua's eyes trembled when he said you. Xian Yi's eyes trembled slightly. When he called out Yu Shuang's name, his heart also trembled. Yu yelled, to the Tian Ye's voice. You the said to Ive, to Yi to Shi. Yi. Mo Biming glanced at Xian Yi, knowing that there was no way to salvage the situation. Then, he cast a sinister glance at Nietian, and his figure flickered as he disappeared. Yi. Yi to Y. To Yi to you, I to you to Y. Yi he too. Xian Yi looked at the crowd on the ground and seemed tired. He waved his hand and said, Disperse. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd didn't dare to delay any longer and quickly dispersed. Ancestor, Xian Tianluo and Xian Xiao came to Xian Ye's side and bowed to him. Tianluo, leave Xian Xiao to me. Xian Yi nodded and took the unconscious Xian Xiao from Xian Tianluo. From now on, Xian Xiao is no longer the crown prince of the Black Moon Empire. Xian Xiao will be the crown prince. Xian Tianluo and Xian Xiao were stunned. Thank you, ancestor. After a few seconds, Xian Xiao came to his senses and knelt to thank him. Xian Xiao will not let you down. Xian Yi nodded with a smile and didn't say anything else. He turned to Nietian and said, Nietian, let's talk. Sure. Nietian seemed to have expected this. He smiled calmly and said sure. Nietian had exposed too much, especially the spirit dragon ring, which would definitely attract Xian Ye's attention. After a while, Nietian and Xian Yi came to a secret place outside the imperial city. Mr. Xian, please say what you want to say. Nietian said bluntly. Nietian. Xian Yi looked Nietian up and down. A strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth as he said, Xian Xiao became what he is now because of you. I know that Xian Xiao and Xian Xiao didn't join forces at all. Xian Xiao didn't send you to the blood death field. Everything was done by you alone. Xian Xiao is just your scapegoat. Am I right? Huh? Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed slightly. He hadn't expected Xian Yi to be so shrewd as to guess everything. Don't be nervous. Xian Yi smiled and said, I won't pursue Xian Zhao's matter. Xian Xiao is arrogant and Xian Xiao is gloomy. If I have to choose between the two of them to be the emperor of the Black Moon Empire, I can only choose Xian Xiao. Nie Tian's eyes twitched. Xian Yi's shrewdness far exceeded his expectations. He seemed to have seen through everything. Xian Yi nodded slightly as a hint of seriousness appeared on his face. His gaze became even more oppressive as he said, I won't stop Xian Xiao from entering the forbidden land of wind and cloud, but I want you to guarantee that he will come out alive and obtain the inheritance. Mr. Xian, you're making things difficult for me. Nie Tian looked straight at Xian Yi and didn't avoid his gaze. I can protect Xian Xiao, but I can't guarantee that he will obtain the inheritance. Perhaps there is no inheritance in the forbidden land of wind and cloud. Nie Tian, you and I are both smart people. Xian Yi smiled cold. These two requests are my bottom line. If you can't do it, the consequences will be severe. I don't care who you are, be it the dragon abyss of demons or the divine martial hall. This is the holy light region. However, this is the holy light domain. Since you're here, you must agree to my conditions. Oh, Nie Tian's lips curled up. Looks like I have to agree to your conditions today. You're a smart person. You won't refuse. Xian Yi smiled and said, I want 2 spots to enter the forbidden land of wind and cloud. As for the others, I'll leave it to you. With that, Xian Yi moved and left with Xian Xiao. What a cunning old fox. Nie Tian looked in the direction Xian Yi disappeared with a sharp glint in his eyes. Master, that old man is quite powerful. The corpse demon lord chuckled in the chaotic original coffin. Xian Yi was indeed cunning. At least, Nie Tian had never seen someone as cunning as him since his rebirth. It seemed like he had to be careful when dealing with the Black Moon Imperial family in the future. Chapter 799. Black Moon Empire, Black Moon Imperial City, Blacksmith's Guild. What? The patriarch of the Xian family has appeared. A familiar voice came from one of the rooms. It was Huojia. Yes. Beside Huojia, Bai Luo nodded. That old Xian, he hasn't appeared for 50 to 60 years. I thought he was already in the grave. Huojia chuckled and said, Quick, tell me, why did Xian Yi appear? Bai Luo looked at Huojia's excited face, but his expression was slightly awkward. He said, Teacher, this whole thing is a little complicated. All of this was caused by one person. Caused by one person? Fire Armor smiled as a face appeared in his mind. His expression flickered as he exclaimed, Don't tell me, it's Nie Tian again. Yes. Bai Luo's Adam's apple bobbed, and he gulped down his saliva. He then told Fire Armor everything that had happened. Finally, he said, after the patriarch of the Xian family forced the North Nether King to retreat, he took Nie Tian away. Nie Tian and Xian Yi left together? Fire Armor was taken aback by Nie Tian's words. A moment later, he exclaimed, Xian, you didn't kill that brat, did he? In the past 2 days, Huojia's impression of Nie Tian had changed again and again. He had thought that Nie Tian was a rare mind energy genius, who knew that Nie Tian was even more talented at causing trouble. First, it was the Yin family, then Crown Prince Xian Xiao, then the Bloody Field, and now the patriarch of the Xian family. The level of trouble he caused was rising. Huojia could barely accept it. Previously, Huojia had said that Nie Tian was a hornet's nest. Now, he was saying that Nie Tian was a fighter jet in a hornet's nest. Teacher, don't worry. Bai Luo's mouth twitched. I heard that the patriarch of the Xian family treats Nie Tian well. He even saved Nie Tian's life from the North Nether King. He probably won't kill him. Oh, that's good. Huojia nodded. Then he shouted, That brat, it's good that he dies at Xian Ye's hands. Then I can live in peace. Just at this moment, an indifferent voice rang out. Old man Hua, it's not good to curse someone behind their back. As the calm voice faded, a figure pushed open the door and entered. It was none other than Nie Tian. When Hua Jia saw Nie Tian, although his words were unforgiving, he could not conceal the concern in his eyes. Nie Tian, you're still alive? Although he had only known Nie Tian for a few days, Fire Armor had a very good impression of him. Unknowingly, he had already begun to treat Nie Tian as his disciple. My life is stinky and tough. I won't die anytime soon. Nie Tian laughed and said, It seems like you all know what happened today. We're not the only ones who know. Everyone in Dark Moon City knows. Hua Jia shouted in an exaggerated manner, his face full of annoyance. Teacher, I'll take my leave first. Bai Luo was very perceptive. He could tell that Nie Tian had something to talk to Hua Jia about, so he turned around and left. After Bai Luo left, Hua Jia's gaze immediately became strange. He chuckled and said, Nie Tian, Bai Luo said that you blocked the North Dark King's palm. Is that true? Everyone saw it. Countless pairs of eyes saw it. It's absolutely true. Nie Tian smiled proudly. His tail was about to rise. TSK, TSK. Hua Jia laughed as he looked at Nie Tian. He said, Nie Tian, you're really shocking me more and more. Nie Tian smiled. Then, his expression turned serious. He said, Elder Hua, I'm looking for you to ask about something. He had come to the Craftsman's Guild to ask about the Heavenly Demon Cult. Hua Jia had lived for hundreds of years, so he should be very clear. Yes, ask away. Hua Jia took a sip of tea to calm himself down. I want to know what kind of organization the Heavenly Demon Cult is. Nie Tian's gaze focused as he asked in a deep voice. Heavenly Demon Cult. Hua Jia thought for a while and was stunned. He said, Brat, why are you asking this? You're not thinking of doing something bad again, are you? Nie Tian smiled and said, Mo Biming is a member of the Heavenly Devil Cult. I injured his son and caused him to lose face. I even caused the Blood Death field to close. He wants nothing more than to tear me to pieces. Of course, I want to know about the Heavenly Demon Cult. That's true. Hua Jia nodded. Then, his expression turned serious. He said, Speaking of the Heavenly Demon Cult, I have to talk about the Black Moon Empire. The reason why the Black Moon Empire is called the Black Moon Empire is because the empire was founded by two big families, the Xian family and the Yu family. When the Black Moon Empire was founded, there were two emperors called the Xian Sovereign and the Moon Sovereign. However, for some reason, the Xian family and the Yu family had a conflict. At first, the two families wanted to form a marriage alliance to ease the conflict. Who knew that the bride of the Yu family would break off the marriage and elope with someone else? The Xian family was furious, and the two families broke off completely. The two families fought to the death, and the Xian family emerged victorious, wiping out the entire Yu family. Wiping out the entire family? Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. The conflict between the two families had led to the destruction of the other family. It was truly unexpected. After all, the Yu family was a family that had fought alongside the Xian family. Yes, Hua Jia nodded and said, the entire Yu family was wiped out, but one person survived. It was the girl from the Yu family who eloped with someone after the marriage alliance. In order to avenge the Yu family, she founded the Heavenly Demon Cult. That girl was called Yu Rushuang, right? Nie Tian suddenly asked. Hua Jia was startled and asked, How did you know? I guessed. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, If my guess is correct, the person who arranged the marriage alliance with Yu Rushuang was the Xian family's ancestor, Xian Yi. Is that so? Hua Jia glanced suspiciously at Nie Tian, then smiled and said, You know quite a lot, you brat. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He had guessed all this from Xian Yi and Yu Hua's conversation. He hadn't expected that there would be such a story between Xian Yi and Yu Rushuang. No wonder Xian Yi became so unsettled at the mention of Yu Rushuang's name. Hua Jia sighed and said, In truth, the Heavenly Demon Cult's growth has a lot to do with Xian Yi's indifference. Perhaps Xian Yi felt guilty for what happened back then, so he couldn't bear to destroy the cult. Was it Xian Yi who gave the order to wipe out the entire Yu family? Nie Tian asked curiously. No. Hua Jia shook his head. Hua Jia shook his head and said, Back then, Xian Yi was only a prince. The person who ordered the extermination of the Yu family was his father. I see. Tian nodded and asked, "How is the heavenly demon cult's power now? It seems that Xian Yi is somewhat wary of them." Chapter 800. North Nether King is one of the 4 kings of the heavenly demon cult. Tian's eyes narrowed in surprise. The strength of the heavenly demon cult had exceeded Tian's expectations. North Nether King was in the 5th level of the celestial being realm, which was on par with Xian Tianluo. However, he was only one of the 4 kings. There were still 2 deputy leaders and a leader above him. This meant that the heavenly demon cult's leader, Yu Shuang, was definitely not weaker than Xian Yi. Without Xian Yi, the Black Moon Empire would be destroyed by the heavenly demon cult in an instant. It was very strange that Xian Yi had watched the heavenly demon cult grow over the years without doing anything. Xian Yi was clearly not a kind person. Perhaps it was because he loved Yu Shuang very much. "Elder Hua, do you know how strong Yu Shuang is?" Tian asked Hua Jia directly. "I don't know." Hua Jia shook his head. 100 years ago, Yu Shuang appeared in the Black Moon Imperial City once. Back then, she was on par with Xian Yi. Now that 100 years have passed, her strength should be similar to Xian Yi's. Yes, Tian nodded in agreement. The most important thing for a cultivator to cultivate was before the age of 100. After that, the growth of one's strength would slow down. Unless one was a genius or had some kind of fortuitous encounter, the growth of one's strength would be very limited. It seems that there will be a battle between the Black Moon Empire and the heavenly demon cult sooner or later. Tian smiled faintly, a playful smile in his eyes. "Little Nya, you've offended the heavenly demon cult. You must be careful in the Black Moon Empire. I don't want to take a corpse as my disciple." Hua Jia reminded Tian. He still wanted to take Tian as his disciple. Tian nodded. Then, he thought of something and asked, "Elder Hua, there's one more thing I'd like to ask you. Have you heard of an organization called the Burial Blade Society?" "The Burial Blade Society?" Hua Jia was stunned. Then, his face darkened. "Little brat, did you offend the Burial Blade Society too?" Tian had a helpless expression as he said, "I accidentally killed a member of the Burial Blade Society in the bloody arena. When he was in the Blood Death field, he killed Lung Shui, and Lung Shui was a member of the Burial Blade Society." Accidentally? Black lines appeared on Fire Armor's face. He suddenly felt like crying, but no tears would come. "Is Zhong Dao very strong?" Tian was curious when he saw Fire Armor's reaction. "Not just very strong." Hua Jia almost shrieked. The Burial Blade Society is an extremely mysterious organization, and its members are all blade users. According to rumors, the Saber Burial Association's Saberhead is already a Saber Soul Saber wielder. He is just one step away from comprehending the saber profundity. The soul of the saber. Tian was slightly surprised, but then he smiled and said, "This strength is indeed very strong." Elder Yu is also a Saber Soul Saber user. Moreover, he had directly leaped from Saber Spirit to Saber Soul, leaping over the realm of Saber Soul. Tian had never seen a situation like Elder Yu's, so he didn't know how he did it. "Kid, don't take it lightly. The Burial Blade Society's strength is no weaker than the Heavenly Demon cults, and they're a bigger threat to you than the Heavenly Demon cult. You must be extra careful in the future." Fire Armor was speechless at Tian's attitude. This guy seemed to be indifferent to everything. "Elder Hua, don't worry. I'm very careful in everything I do," Tian said confidently with a faint smile. Fire Armor was speechless. Tian had offended so many people and organizations in the past 2 days. If this was called being careful, then wouldn't he poke a hole in the sky if he was not careful? "Elder Hua, how's my sword?" Tian asked again. In the past few days, it had been very inconvenient for him to fight without the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Now that his sword principal realm had improved, his combat strength would improve by leaps and bounds if he held the sword Absolute Heaven Slash again. "Kid, it's only been 2 days. Do you think it's easy to refine the Heavenly Blackstone?" Elder Hua said impatiently. "The material of your sword is a bit special. It'll be difficult to fuse it. I'll need at least another half a month to succeed." "Half a month," Tian muttered with a helpless expression. He could only say, Half a month it is then. Kid, in this half a month, you must behave yourself. Don't go around causing trouble, Fire Armor said solemnly. Don't worry. As long as others don't provoke me, I won't provoke them. Nyetian smiled faintly. He then stood up and prepared to leave. Fire Armor also stood up. He suddenly smiled strangely and said, Brat, that girl Xian Miao Miao is with you, right? Are you helping her increase her mental strength? Nyetian nodded and said, Elder Hua, don't worry. After a month, Xian Miao Miao's mental strength will definitely reach rank 35. With that, Nyetian didn't delay any longer. He turned around and left. This kid is very strange. Seeing how confident he is, does he really have a way to increase his mental strength? Fire Armor muttered as he watched Nyetian's back. After leaving the Craftsman's Guild, Nyetian returned to the Yu family. In his room, Nyetian sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. He told Yu Jiao that he would be cultivating in seclusion for half a month. Although he had only been in the Sumeru world for a few days, Nyetian's experience was very rich. The opponents he encountered and the fierce battles he experienced made him realize that his strength was still too weak. He needed to increase his strength as soon as possible. The art of wind and cloud would begin in 2 months. When that time came, the people from the 5 forces that would enter the forbidden land of wind and cloud would definitely be top-notch martial artists. Even if they were all Heaven Evolution realm martial artists, Nyetian still had to be cautious. Moreover, he knew that the most dangerous thing in the forbidden land of wind and cloud was not these people, but the forbidden land itself. The forbidden land of wind and cloud was an ancient ruin. For hundreds of years, no one had walked out of it alive. This showed how dangerous it was. There was another thing that worried Nyetian. Xian Xiao had been taken away by Xian Yi. He didn't know what Xian Yi would do to Xian Xiao, but if Xian Xiao woke up, he would definitely settle the score with him. In order to deal with the upcoming situation, Nyetian had to increase his strength as soon as possible. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. The morning sun shone into the room. The door was pushed open, and Nyetian walked out. After half a month of cultivation, Nyetian's strength had increased from Heavenly Evolution 4th level to Heavenly Evolution 5th level. Being able to increase his strength by 1 level in half a month was already very fast. Half a month has passed. It's time to retrieve my absolute Heaven Slash. Nyetian's eyes were sharp, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. He prepared to go to the Craftsman's Guild to retrieve his sword. Just as his figure walked out of the door of his jade mansion, something strange happened. In the sky, a rainbow-colored sword gleam shot into the sky. A huge sword intent bloomed in the sky, condensing into a huge sword shadow that was hundreds of meters long. It was vast and powerful, overbearing and sharp, as if it was going to tear the world apart. Chapter 801. Emperor Light. It's coming from the direction of the Craftsman's Guild. Could it be? Nyetian looked at the dazzling sword image in the sky, and his heart inexplicably jolted. He immediately became excited, and his figure moved, transforming into a streak of light and flying out. Nyetian was extremely excited as he sprinted in the Imperial City. Of course, he could tell that the Emperor Light sword shadow in the air was emitted by the Heaven Severing Sword. It seemed that the Heaven Severing Sword had advanced to a stage 9 Emperor weapon. In Nyetian's opinion, this was impossible. Even if the Heaven Severing Sword perfectly fused with the Black Stone, it would at most advance to a stage 8 spirit weapon. It would never become a stage 9 Emperor weapon. Moreover, Huijia was only a stage 8 craftsman. It was impossible for him to refine a stage 9 Emperor weapon. A stage 9 Emperor weapon could only be refined by a peak stage 9 craftsman. Just as Nyetian was sprinting, he suddenly sensed a figure approaching him in the dark. Someone's not friendly. Sensing the killing intent of the person in the dark, Nyetian narrowed his eyes and spread out his divine sense. As expected, he saw a figure chasing after him. The figure was extremely fast and released a powerful saber will. His entire person was as fierce and domineering as a saber. Someone from the Burial Blade Society. Nietion was slightly surprised. To be able to release such a domineering saber will, it was likely someone from the Burial Blade Society. Huajia had warned him before that the Burial Blade Society was an organization more terrifying than the Heavenly Demon Cult. So he must be careful. Nietion did not expect someone from the Burial Blade Society to appear so quickly. Nietion was concerned about the heaven-severing sword and did not want to be entangled with this person. He sped up again. However, that person had no intention of letting him go and sped up as well. In the blink of an eye, Nietion had arrived at the square in front of the Craftsman's Guild. He had just stood still when he felt a cold saber while attacking him. Boom! Nietion raised his head and saw a stream of saber intent blossoming in the sky. A cold aura enveloped the entire space, and the temperature of the surrounding air plummeted. Ice crystals actually formed in the air, which was extremely strange. What a cold saber intent! Nietion's eyes narrowed. The person who came was very strong, and his saber intent was even more strange. It was actually infused with an icy aura. At this moment, a figure appeared in the void. This figure was like a frosty blade that could slice through the heavens and earth, sharp and piercing. Nietion's body shook slightly. He activated the sword of the divine wheel, and the power of thunder appeared around him. The mighty thunder and lightning spread out and melted the ice in the air. In the next moment, that terrifying blade intent suddenly descended. It was like ice, like frost and snow. The air was filled with white frost and snow. A blade of ice and snow whizzed over, covering the sky and covering the earth as it slashed down. Suddenly, the entire space seemed to freeze, leaving only the cold blade intent raging in the space. Thunder Dragon. Nietion's eyes narrowed, and the power of thunder gathered in his body. A dragon roar shook the sky, and the thunder dragon appeared again, clashing with the blade of ice in the air. Boom! The saber shadow and the dragon shadow collided. The power of ice and the power of thunder collided with each other. The void seemed to shatter. Countless pieces of ice fell and smashed onto the ground, instantly disappearing. Exciting. Take another strike from me. The person in the sky screamed and raised his hands high. The space immediately froze, and the will of ice gathered on the blade in an instant. Cold Tooth Strike. The person screamed and slashed down with his blade. The void shook for a moment, and the terrifying shadow of the blade, which was thousands of meters long, came crashing down like a mountain. The space within thousands of meters was directly frozen. The cold blade seemed to directly tear the space apart, and the coldness surged to both sides like waves. Feeling the power of this blade, Nietion's eyes froze. Immediately, the sword of the divine wheel disappeared from his body. He formed a seal with both hands, and the ground immediately shook. The ground was lifted up by an invisible force, and with a loud bang, the ground shattered and then condensed in the air. Seal of Annihilation, open. As Nietion's indifferent voice fell, a huge shield of earth formed in front of him. Boom! The shadow of the blade in the air directly landed on the Seal of Annihilation. The power of the blade in the sky bloomed, and rocks flew everywhere, and sand and dust filled the sky. Immediately, Nietion's figure moved, and he retreated thousands of meters. The Seal of Annihilation finally blocked that person's blade. In the void, that person casually waved his hand, and the coldness bloomed in the air. The flying rocks and dust were actually frozen, and then they slowly fell to the ground. This scene was very strange, as if time had slowed down. The sand and rocks in the air slowly fell, and a face appeared in front of Nietion. It was a very young face, about 25 or 26 years old. His facial features were resolute and cold, and there was a cold aura about him. As his figure landed, a cold intent spread in the space, and the entire square seemed to have turned into a cold winter, surging with bone-chilling coldness. You're very good. No wonder Lung Shui died in your hands. That person's figure froze in the air, and he stared coldly at Nietion. His cold killing intent was on the verge of bursting out. You're indeed a member of the Burial Blade cult. Nietion smiled faintly, and his face was as calm as an ancient well. This person's strength was not too strong, and his cultivation was only at the 5th level of the heavenly evolution realm. However, his blade intent was very strange, and it made his combat strength very terrifying. Without a sword in hand, Nyetian could not unleash the power of the sword intent in his body. It was really difficult for him to rely on his sword intent to contend with the other party. If he had not used the seal of annihilation earlier, it was very likely that Nyetian would have been injured by that slash. At this moment, the commotion in the square alarmed the people of the Craftsman Guild. Many people walked out, and they were all dumbfounded when they saw the entire square turn into ruins. Bastard, who dares to cause trouble in the Craftsman Guild? Then a furious voice rang out. It was Huijia who walked over. When he saw Nyetian's figure and then the blade user in the air, his face could not help but sink, and he shouted, "Boinya, who did you offend this time?" Nyetian smiled bitterly and said, "Elder Hua, I did not offend him this time." He took the initiative to seek revenge. Seek revenge? Huijia was slightly stunned. When he saw the blade user in the air, his eyes trembled, and he shouted, "Who are you? How dare you make a move in the Craftsman Guild? Are you tired of living?" That person knew Huijia's identity, so he did not panic. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, "Master Huijia, I am Lungya, a member of the Burial Blade cult. This time I am not targeting the Craftsman Guild, but this silver-haired swordsman. He killed a member of the Burial Blade cult, so I must take his head today." His voice was calm, and there was a faint threat in his words. Burial Blade cult. Huijia's eyes narrowed, and he began to think. If he used the power of the Craftsman Guild to kill Lungya, it would be equivalent to dragging the guild into a quagmire. It would probably be impossible for him to stay out of this matter. It did not matter to him, but the Craftsman Guild did not belong to him alone. He had to consider others. Chapter 802. Sword. Huijia was stunned for a moment before he reacted. A long sword appeared in his hand. It was extremely sharp and emitted a faint glow. Although it wasn't dazzling, it gave off an undeniable sharpness. Heavenly Slash Sword, my old friend, you're going to shine again. Nyetian took the Heavenly Slash Sword, and his aura changed instantly. He became sharp, confident, and oppressive. With the Heavenly Slash Sword in his hand, Nyetian wasn't afraid of anyone. Looking at the sword in his hand, Nyetian was slightly stunned. The Heavenly Slash Sword was only a 7th-rank spiritual weapon. Why did it release such a dazzling light? It was very strange. Nyetian glanced at Huijia. I'll ask him after I'm done with Lungya. 7th-rank spiritual weapon, not bad. Lungya's eyes flickered when he saw Nyetian holding the long sword in his hand and exuding an imposing aura. Then he smiled and said, "You're not a sword spirit, but you're able to condense such a terrifying sword intent, and you've even reached the stage of sword spirit." Although the indifferent voice was filled with surprise, it was also filled with arrogance. "You're not bad yourself to be able to exchange one move with me when I don't have a sword." Nyetian smiled, mocking Huijia. Huh? Lungya's eyes darkened. Lin Fan was obviously looking down on him. However, what Nyetian said was the truth. When they exchanged blows, he didn't have a sword in his hand. Lungya's face stiffened. He felt a lump of anger in his chest that he couldn't expel. "Brat, you're very arrogant. I, Lungya, specialize in killing arrogant people," Lungya said coldly, releasing a frosty aura from his body. Frost and snow began to fall from the sky, enveloping Nyetian with a bone-chilling coldness. Nyetian wasn't afraid at all. He shook his body and the coldness dissipated. His eyes flickered and he said coldly, "I'm arrogant because I have the ability to be arrogant. When I don't have a sword in my hand, you can take one strike from me. But when I have a sword in my hand, you can't even take one strike from me." His indifferent voice was filled with incomparable arrogance. Since Lungya said that he was arrogant, then he would show him how arrogant he was. Lungya's face twitched violently as his facial features contorted into a sinister expression. He had seen arrogant people, and these people had all died under his blade. Nyetian was no exception. "Arrogant brat, I'll take your life with one slash. Lungya's figure moved slightly, and the frost of the air intensified. The white frost covered the entire space with a layer of icy chill. So cold, the crowd felt a bone-piercing chill and involuntarily took a few steps back. Their gazes towards Lungya could not help but tremble. Lungya was very strong. He infused his saber intent with the intent of ice, which could even freeze heaven and earth. Nietian stood where he was like an unsheathed sword. His expression was emotionless, as if he had become one with the sword absolute heaven slash. This was the first battle after the sword absolute heaven slash was upgraded. Nietian wanted to kill with one strike. Let's do it. Nietian took a step forward and leaped into the air, facing Lungya with a distance of several hundred meters between them. Courting death. Lungya's figure turned cold as he released his icy intent, freezing the space around him. The icy intent permeated the air, and crystal-clear ice crystals appeared in the air. As Lungya released his saber intent, the icy intent in the air became more intense. Lungya's ice seal, kill with one strike. Lungya's lips trembled as he spat out a cold voice. A huge icy intent enveloped the entire space, as if it was going to freeze time and space. Nietian was slightly stunned. He then smiled and said indifferently, "It's a saber formation. It seems like I have underestimated you." Lungya was enraged by Nietian's words and used his strongest move. His saber intent condensed into a formation, enveloping Nietian within it. What a strong formation. Will Nietian be all right? Huojia saw the scene in the air, and his heart skipped a beat. He was worried for Nietian. Following the appearance of Lungya's ice seal saber formation, a cold intent permeated the air. The crowd could feel the icy intent, and ice crystals formed on the hair of many of them. "Brat, you should be content to die under my ice seal saber formation." Lungya laughed coldly. Boundless icy saber intent condensed in the air, and an icy saber shadow appeared. The saber intent was extremely sharp, and the air was filled with a cold saber hum. Feeling the icy intent around him, Nietian's expression did not change at all. His gaze was so calm that it made people's hair stand on end. Only his killing intent continued to condense and increase. "Die!" A cold voice rang out as Lungya slashed down with his saber. The icy saber intent blossomed in the air as the killing intent surged over. A dazzling white saber light tore through the air, aiming for Nietian. Proud sword art. Madness of Doomsday reverse kill. At this moment, the corners of Nietian's mouth curled up. A strange smile appeared on his face as the sword intent in his body gushed forth. Rumble. The frozen space around him directly shattered. Nietian was like a blade of destruction, tearing apart everything in his path. His astral soul, sword intent, transformed into starlight that flickered in the air. His proud sword intent emitted a dazzling sword light, and his thunderbolt sword intent revolved around his thunderbolt sword intent. The three types of sword intent perfectly fused together as a gigantic sword shadow appeared in the air, causing the entire space to tremble violently. Rumble. The ice seal saber formation that enveloped Nietian's body suddenly shattered. Rumble. Immediately, the sword shadow and the saber shadow clashed in the air. However, the sword shadow swallowed the saber shadow. Starlight, sword light, and thunderbolts all exploded in the air at the same time. Lungya felt something was amiss as he screamed. He wanted to retreat, but it was too late. In the air, a violent wave of murderous intent exploded in the air as it pressed down on Lungya. Lungya's pupils shrunk as he found it hard to control the look of despair in his eyes. At this moment, he finally realized that the difference between him and Nietian was too great. Shwa. In the next second, a sword filled with killing intent slashed down. The dazzling sword light blossomed and a soft sound rang out. Lungya was sliced in half by the sword light. The moment his body was separated, it was swallowed by the powerful sword intent. Not even his bones were left. Lungya had rushed here to seek revenge against Nietian. He didn't expect that he wouldn't even be able to defend against one attack from Yetian and would be killed. The sky-piercing sword light flashed and disappeared. The cold chi dissipated as well, and the space returned to normal. The entire place was dead silent. Countless pairs of eyes stared blankly at Yetian. They didn't know how to express the shock in their hearts. They thought that Lungya was very strong, but they didn't expect that Yetian was even stronger. Both of them were clearly at the 5th level of the heavenly evolution realm. One was at the spirit of the saber, while the other was at the spirit of the sword. Why was there such a huge difference in their combat strength? Yetian relied on his powerful sword intent to crush Lungya in one move. Any one of his sword intent was stronger than Lungya's saber intent, let alone 3 sword intents fused together. The frenzied Doomsday just now was the 3rd form of the advanced 3 forms of the Proud Sword technique. It was the first time Yetian used it on Lungya. It seemed like it was overkill to use it on him. Yetian ignored everyone's gazes and slowly descended to Huijia's side. He raised the heaven-slash sword in his hand and smiled. "Thank you, Elder Hua." Chapter 803. In the room, Yetian and Huijia stood facing each other. "Elder Hua, I just saw the sword absolute heaven-slash-release an imperial light that soared into the sky. What's going on?" Yetian did not hold back and directly asked the question in his heart. The scene just now was too strange. Although the imperial light had only flashed for a moment, Yetian had clearly seen it. It was indeed imperial light. It did not make sense for a rank 7 spirit weapon to release the power of imperial light. "You're asking me what's going on? I'm the one who wants to ask you what's going on." Huijia had not recovered from the shock of Yetian killing Lungya with a single strike. When he heard Yetian's question, he replied snappily. Yetian frowned slightly, expressing his confusion. Huijia let out a long breath and calmed down a little. He said, "Little Nya, tell me honestly, where did you get this sword?" Yetian was stunned for a moment before he said seriously, "I bought this sword from a street stall for 10 gold coins." Of course, he could not tell Huijia the true origin of the sword absolute heaven slash. Moreover, what he said was right because he had indeed bought it from a street stall. "Really?" Huijia looked doubtful. He did not quite believe Yetian's words. "Really?" Yetian nodded solemnly. "This sword was broken at the time. The stall owner sold it to me at the price of a rank 1 spirit weapon. I modified it a few times and it became a rank 5 spirit weapon." "Is it really from a street stall?" Huijia could not help but frown when he saw that Yetian did not seem to be lying. He then chuckled and said, "Little Nya, I really don't know what kind of dogshit luck you have to buy a rank 9 spirit weapon from street stall. What kind of dogshit luck is that? I even met you at a street stall." Yetian muttered and then pretended to be surprised. "You said that this sword is a 9th tier Emperor artifact. What do you mean?" Seeing the surprise on Yetian's face, Huijia chuckled and said, "To be exact, this sword was once a tier 9 Emperor artifact. However, for some reason, it became damaged and you obtained it. The material of this sword is very unique. I've never seen it before. When I fused the Outsky Black Rock into the sword, it triggered the residual Emperor Light energy in the sword, which is why the Emperor Light sword shadow appeared." "I see." Yetian smiled bitterly. He thought that the Heaven-slash sword had been upgraded to a tier 9 Emperor artifact. In the end, it was just the remnant Emperor Light from before. However, Huijia was taken aback and said, "Brat, this sword is still able to seal a portion of the Monarch Light's power, even though it's broken. This means that it must have been a peak 9th grade Monarch weapon in its previous life. Only this kind of peak-level Monarch weapon can trigger Monarch Light Reflection." "Monarch Light Reflection," Yetian muttered to himself. This was the first time he had heard of this term. Yetian was a dabbler in the art of artifact refinement. He couldn't even compare to Huijia. At this moment, Huijia suddenly chuckled and said, "Brat Nya, can you lend this sword to this old man to study for a few days?" "That won't do." Yetian was taken aback. He quickly put away the Heaven-slash sword and said with a smile, "I have so many enemies now. If I don't have the Heaven-slash sword, my battle prowess will be greatly reduced. I don't want to die young." "That's true." Huojia shook his head helplessly. He had also seen the powerful battle prowess that the Heaven-Slash sword had displayed in Nie Tian's hands. It was enough for him to easily deal with any opponent below the Heaven tier. Bratnya, how was that girl Xin Miao Miao? There are only 10 days left until the day of our appointment. Since he couldn't borrow the Heaven-Slash sword, Huojia immediately turned his attention to Nie Tian. He looked at Nie Tian with a malicious gaze. There's still more than 10 days. It's still early. Nie Tian smiled indifferently. He looked completely confident. Fortunately, Huojia reminded Nie Tian. It was time for him to check on the situation of Xian Miao Miao and the others. Just as Nie Tian was about to leave, Bai Luo's figure appeared. Nie Tian, someone is looking for you outside, Bai Luo said calmly when he saw Nie Tian. Someone is looking for me? Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. He obviously didn't expect that someone would come to the Artificers Guild. It's a black-clothed, ancient martial art practitioner. He seems to be the 19th Prince's man, Bai Luo said. Xian Xiu. Nie Tian was even more puzzled. He informed Huojia and turned to leave. Walking out of the guild hall, Nie Tian saw a figure in the distance. The face was unfamiliar, but the aura was familiar. It was the ancient martial art practitioner that he had injured in the Songlong Academy. Nie Tian looked at the other party. It was a middle-aged, ancient martial art practitioner. He looked ordinary and his aura was restrained. However, his abilities were at the first heaven realm. He was very strong. Mr. Nie Tian. When Crow saw Nie Tian walk out, he bowed slightly in a very respectful manner. Nie Tian wanted to speak, but he didn't know how to address him. My name is Crow. I am a 19th Prince's personal guard, Crow said. The people from the Heaven-Severing sect are here. They are now at the Chiu Palace. The prince invites you over. The people from the Heaven-Severing sect? Nie Tian was slightly taken aback. He immediately recalled that Xian Xiu had mentioned this faction before. The Forbidden Land of Wind and Cloud was located at the intersection of 5 major factions. The Heaven-Severing sect was one of them. The 5 factions were the Mystic Moon Empire, the Blazing Sun Empire, the Konoha Empire, the Sky Sword Pavilion, and the Heaven-Severing sect. Xian Xiu had said that the Mystic Moon Empire had a good relationship with the Sky Sword Pavilion, while the other 3 factions were closer. Now that the Wind and Cloud Crusade was about to begin, the Heaven-Severing sect's sudden visit clearly had an ulterior motive. All right, let's go and meet the people from the Heaven-Severing sect. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gestured for Crow to lead the way. A moment later, Nie Tian and Crow arrived at the Xian Xiu Palace. The two of them walked directly to the palace hall. Before entering the hall, Nie Tian could see from afar that there were several figures standing in the hall. Each of them had a steady aura and were not weak. Xian Xiu sat in the hall. Opposite him was a man of about 30 years old. The man's expression was cold and domineering. Who is the person sitting opposite your highness? Nie Tian asked softly when he saw the man from afar. Nie Tian discovered that the man's cultivation was not weak. He was in the first layer of the sky, human realm. Mr. Nie Tian, that person is the young master of the Heaven-Severing sect, Zhu Chun. Crow whispered to Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded slightly and walked towards the hall. I heard that the 19th Highness wants to enter the Forbidden Land of Wind and Cloud personally. Is that true? Right at this moment, Zhu Chun suddenly opened his mouth and said, The Forbidden Land of Wind and Cloud is filled with unfathomable dangers. No one has ever walked out of it alive. If the 19th Highness were to accidentally die in there, it would be a great loss to the Dark Moon Empire. A calm voice sounded, but there was a hint of mockery in it. Thank you for your concern, Brother Zhu. Since I dare to enter the Forbidden Land of Wind and Cloud, I have the confidence to walk out alive. Xian Xiu frowned and said coldly, Is that so? Zhu Chun smiled coldly and said, The 19th Highness, if there is no one else in the Mystic Moon Empire, my Heaven-Severing sect will be happy to help. My Heaven-Severing sect is happy to help. Our Heaven-Severing sect is full of talents. There are many people who want to enter the Forbidden Land of Wind and Cloud. There are many geniuses in the Mystic Moon Empire. I don't need help. Xian Xiu was stunned for a moment and said cold. Chapter 804. The young master of the Absolute Heaven sect, Zhu Chun, stared at Xian Xiu with a dark expression. His voice carried an undisguised threat. "Brother Zhu, what do you mean?" Xian Xiu was stunned. He did not expect that Zhu Chun would dare to speak to him with such an attitude when he came to the Chiu Palace. It seemed that Zhu Chun was here to provoke him. 19th Royal Highness, you are a smart man. You should know what I mean. Zhu Chun's expression was, since the Black Moon Empire has no one, it is useless for you to have so many slots. Why not give a few to the Absolute Heaven sect? How dare you? Xian Xiu's face darkened and he roared angrily. How dare you? Zhu Chun was too arrogant. He actually came to the Chiu Palace to provoke Xian Xiu and asked for a slot to enter the forbidden land of wind and cloud. Zhu Chun dared to be so arrogant because the news of Xian Zhao's accident had spread among the 5 major forces. Lord North of the Heavenly Demon Cult had knocked Prince Xian Zhao unconscious. Even the patriarch of the Xian family did not dare to touch him. Once this news spread, all the forces treated the Black Moon Empire as a pushover. If Xian Zhao was still around, Zhu Chun would definitely not dare to be so arrogant. Zhu Chun was also one of the 9 demons and ranked 4th. Although he could not compare to Xian Zhao, he could suppress Xian Xiu. When he came to the Black Moon Empire, Xian Yi, Xian Tianluo, and the other senior martial artists could not touch him. This was an unwritten rule among the 5 major forces. The older generation could not interfere in the negotiations between the younger generation. Because of this, Zhu Chun dared to be arrogant in the Chiu Palace. Xian Xiu glared at Zhu Chun, and his expression turned uglier. "I'm sorry, I cannot give you the slot to enter the Black Moon Empire." At this moment, an indifferent voice was heard outside the hall. Then a figure walked in. Upon seeing Nie Tian, Xian Xiu's face lit up. "Mr. Nie." Zhu Chun was slightly taken aback, and then his gaze swept past Nie Tian. He seemed to not have the slightest interest in Nie Tian as he said coldly, "This young master is talking to your master. What are you barking for?" Nie Tian's strength was at the 5th level of heaven evolution, so Zhu Chun did not take him seriously at all. Nie Tian's face suddenly sank, and his gaze towards Zhu Chun contained an additional trace of killing intent that was icy cold to the extreme. What he hated the most was being called a dog by others. This was practically his reverse scale. Zhu Chun suddenly felt a surge of killing intent enveloping him as his heart involuntarily shuddered. After that, he inclined his head and stared at Nie Tian. At this moment, he suddenly felt a boundlessly vast mental pressure pressing down on him. In an instant, he directly lost control of his mind as his gaze turned sluggish. Nie Tian took a step forward, and suddenly, 2 sharp chees broke through the air. Pooh! Puffed! In the next moment, 2 sounds of flesh being pierced resounded. Zhu Chun's knees had actually been pierced through, causing blood to gush out. Meanwhile, he slid down from his seat and directly knelt before Nie Tian. The instant his knees touched the ground, Zhu Chun felt an intense pain spread throughout his body, causing him to wake up immediately. He raised his head and saw a figure standing in front of him, looking at him with a mocking gaze. "Kneeling when you see your master? You're the real dog, aren't you?" Nie Tianling smiled and forcefully took a step forward. He pushed Zhu Chun aside and directly sat on the latter's seat. "Young master." The few people at the side only reacted after a long time. They also did not understand why Zhu Chun suddenly knelt. Zhu Chun's strength was at the heaven tier, while Nie Tian's strength was only at the heaven evolution realm. Even if Nie Tian was playing tricks, Zhu Chun should be able to deal with it easily. "Stinking brat, you're seeking death." Zhu Chun endured the intense pain and leaped to his feet. He suddenly turned around and glared at Nie Tian with bloodshot eyes as he roared angrily. To think that he, a dignified heaven-tier martial artist, actually knelt on the spot. How could he endure such a great humiliation? "You were the one who wanted to kneel to me. I cannot even stop you. What else could I do?" Nie Tian smiled faintly, a playful and provocative expression on his face. Xian Xiu was simply stupefied. Although everything had happened before him, He had not clearly seen how Nietian had done it. After not seeing him for half a month, Nietian's strength had become even more valiant and strange. Xianxiu, are you going to indulge your subordinate like this? Zhu Chun was enraged, but did not dare to casually attack Nietian. Nietian's strength was too strange, making Zhu Chun fearful. Zhu Chun could only turn around and shout at Xianxiu. Xianxiu was stunned for a while. Then he smiled and said, "Brother Zhu, don't speak nonsense. Mr. Nia is not this prince's subordinate. Like you, he is this prince's guest. You took the initiative to kneel to him and give him your seat. This prince admires your actions." Every single word that Chun Juechen spoke was like steel needles stabbing into Chun Juechen's heart. At that moment, Zhu Chan felt that every inch of his skin and every bone in his body was extremely uncomfortable. "Just now, I was just teaching you a lesson. Don't call others dogs at the drop of a hat." Nietian raised his head slightly and said coldly, "The Xinyu Empire's quota for the wind and cloud art is in my hands. If you want it, come and find me." "The quota for the wind and cloud art is in your hands?" Zhu Chun was suddenly stunned, his face full of disbelief. He sized up Nietian and started to ponder who he was. Xianxiu seemed to be very polite to him. Could it be that he was really not Xianxiu's subordinate? Nietian ignored Zhu Chen's question. Instead, he swept a glance at the latter, then looked at the surrounding people and said coldly, "Zhu Chun, since you said that there are many geniuses in the Absolute Heaven sect, then try using the people around you. If any of them can defeat me, I will offer the 10 quotas for the wind and cloud art with both hands. If no one can defeat me, then get lost from the Xianyu Empire." He could already tell that the people that Zhu Chun had brought were all at the Heavenly Evolution 9th level. In other words, they were the strongest people who had entered the forbidden land of wind and cloud. They were obviously here to provoke him. However, they had chosen the wrong person to provoke in front of Nietian. Zhu Chun was stunned. Then, he looked at Xianxiu and asked coldly, "Xianxiu, can his words make the decision?" "Of course." Xianxiu smiled and said, "The 10 quotas for the Xinyu Empire are all decided by Mr. Nia. If he doesn't want me to go, I can't go either." Xianxiu was very confident in Nietian. He had seen with his own eyes how Nietian and Dark North Monarch had exchanged blows. Nietian's strength was strange and unimaginable. The Heavenly Evolution 9th level martialists by Zhu Chen's side were very strong to others. However, in front of Nietian, they were all trash. Nietian did have the quotas for the wind and cloud art, but he only had 8. This was because Xianyi had taken 2 quotas before he left. Chapter 805. Zhu Chen hesitated. Earlier, he had already witnessed Nietian's strange strength. However, he was unwilling to leave just like that. "Which one of you is willing to fight him?" Suddenly, Zhu Chun turned around and looked at his subordinates. "Young sect master, this subordinate is willing." Right after he spoke, a skinny man stepped forward and looked at Nietian with a sinister gaze. It seemed like he did not care about Nietian at all. "All right." Zhu Chun looked at that cultivator and said, "Ho Yin, you will fight." Although Ho Yin was not the top genius of the Absolute Heaven sect, his combat prowess was very strong. Furthermore, his attacks were ruthless and merciless. It was suitable for him to fight Nietian. "All right, let's go to the drill ground." Xianxiu stood up and smiled faintly. This was the Great Hall, so it was not suitable for fighting. After a while, everyone arrived at the drill ground of the royal residence. Nietian and Ho Yin stepped onto the drill ground while the others watched from afar. "Brat, you just plotted against my young sect master. Now, you will pay with your life." Ho Yin looked Nietian up and down with his cold eyes. Although his words were arrogant, he was actually very cautious and didn't make any rash moves. "With just you." Nietian smiled faintly and took a step forward. A horrifying sword intent was released, and a murderous aura spread in the air. When Ho Yin felt the murderous aura in the air, his face sank slightly. Just this murderous aura made him feel suffocated. Nietian's combat prowess was too strong. It did not match his cultivation at all. "Brat, you are too arrogant." Ho Yin's eyes narrowed, and the ground suddenly trembled. Poisonous thorns grew out of the ground within a few hundred meters. They were like snakes burrowing out of the ground and growing wildly towards the sky. Would attribute primordial spirit. Nietion's gaze froze. Then all the sword intent in his body surged out and chopped off the poisonous thorns around him. Ho Yin's primordial spirit was of the wood attribute, but it was extremely aggressive and poisonous. This kind of primordial spirit had strong control and attack power. Coupled with the poison, it was extremely troublesome. But to Nietion, this kind of original spirit was almost no threat. His 9-star dragon vein physique was not even afraid of the Dark North King's Dark North Devil Chi, so why would he be afraid of a small poisonous thorn? Kid, your strength will be suppressed by my thorny forest. Let's see how you're going to fight me. Ho Yin's aura skyrocketed, and the poisonous thorns grew even more frantically. In the blink of an eye, the area within a few hundred meters turned into a forest of thorns. Oh! Nietion's entire body was covered in thorny thorns, each of them bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws, as if they wanted to tear apart heaven and earth. He sensed a powerful pressure, causing him to involuntarily smile. Not only were the thorns extremely poisonous, but they also possessed some sort of spirit power that was capable of suppressing one's opponent's strength. If an ordinary martial artist were to encounter Ho Yin, it would indeed be difficult for them to contend against him. On the other side, the eyes of the spectators burned as they stared at every movement in the martial arts practice field. Seeing that Ho Yin had trapped Nietion, Zhu Qin's lips curled into a cold smile, and he said indifferently, 19th Highness, your guest's strength is only a so. Your Highness's foresight is really disappointing to hand over the wind and cloud technique to this person. Zhu Chun suddenly felt that he had overestimated Nietion. If he had known that Nietion's strength was only SOSO, he would have directly killed him just now. The battle hasn't even started. Brother Zhu, it's too early to come to a conclusion. Xianxiu smiled faintly, his expression extremely calm. He was not worried about Nietion at all. He knew Nietion's strength better than anyone else. If he wasn't afraid of Heaven Realm martial artists, why would he be afraid of Heaven Evolution Realm martial artists? In the martial arts practice field, Nietion was surrounded by the poisonous thorns. He had a calm expression, but his eyes were filled with a strong sense of mockery. Brat, have you given up? When Ho Yin saw that Nietion was standing still, a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He roared furiously. Since that is the case, I will let you die a quick death. As soon as Ho Yin finished speaking, he raised his arm, and the ground trembled. The poisonous thorns became even more berserk, wreaking havoc in the air and emitting a bone-chilling cold. Poisonous gas filled the air, and the countless poisonous thorns were like giant upright snakes. It was extremely terrifying. Die! A malicious voice came from Ho Yin's throat, and the countless poisonous thorns suddenly moved, piercing towards Nietion. The poisonous thorns completely wrapped around Nietion, and his figure was submerged in the poisonous thorns. Dead. When Zhu Chun saw this scene from afar, his eyes trembled, and he revealed an excited expression. He had not expected Ho Yin to win this battle so easily. Don't worry, young sect master. That brat has been submerged in Ho Yin's poisonous thorns. No matter how powerful he is, he will definitely die a horrible death. A martial artist behind Zhu Chun said with a chuckle. It seemed like it was a foregone conclusion that Nietion would be killed by Ho Yin. Xianxiu was also stunned, and he said in a daze, no, that can't be right. Nietion should not be this weak. Could Ho Yin's poisonous thorns be Nietion's nemesis? When he thought of this, beads of sweat appeared on Xianxiu's forehead. If Nietion died, everything would be over. At this moment, Xianxiu finally understood how important Nietion was to him. 19th Highness, do you still want to say that this young master spoke too early? Zhu Chun smiled provocatively, his eyes filled with contempt. Xianxiu was stunned, not knowing what to say. You are indeed speaking too early. Just when Xianxiu was on the verge of despair, a voice suddenly sounded out. Boom! In the next moment, a violent sound rang out. The thorny thorns that were entangled with each other directly exploded and were crushed by the terrifying sword intent. It's over. Then, a figure soared into the sky, and an indifferent voice rang out. An extremely fast sword intent bloomed in the sky, attacking Ho Yin. Bang! Ho Yin did not have any time to react. He was hit by the sword intent, and his body trembled slightly before it exploded. His flesh and blood were destroyed by the sword intent, and not even his bones were left. The poisonous thorns on the ground immediately disappeared. Everything returned to normal, and a figure stood in the sky above the martial arts arena like a sword god descending to the world. The scene was dead silent. Everyone looked at Niet Tian in disbelief, as if they were looking at a monster. He killed Ho Yin with a single sword strike. This kind of strength was strange and unpredictable. Ha! After a while, Xian Xiu burst into laughter. He looked provocatively at Zhu Chun and said loudly, "Brother Zhu, what do you think of this king's foresight now?" Zhu Chun stood rooted to the ground like a stone statue, unable to react for a long time. Ho Yin, who was at the 9th level of heavenly evolution, had been killed by Niet Tian, who was only at the 5th level of heavenly evolution. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. In fact, he did not know that Niet Tian had the chance to kill him in the hall, but he had not done so and had only made him kneel. Chapter 806. In the training field, Niet Tian's voice was heard, but there was no response for a long time. Zhu Chen was afraid and did not dare to respond. Niet Tian didn't want to waste words with these people. He landed beside Zhu Chen and said coldly, "Since no one dares to fight me, get the hell back to the heaven-severing sect." Zhu Chen seemed to have woken up from a dream. He looked at Niet Tian with surprise, fear, and even fear. Originally, he had come to the Black Moon Empire to humiliate the people of the Black Moon Empire while Xian Xiao was not around. He did not expect to be humiliated in the end. Not only did he have to kneel, but he also lost a Heavenly Evolution 9th stage subordinate. He really deserved it. "Young Sectmaster, let's go," the person behind Zhu Chun said in a low voice. He inadvertently glanced at Niet Tian and could not help but tremble in fear. Niet Tian was too terrifying. He was not someone they could fight against. "Let's go." Zhu Chun felt as if a huge rock was pressing down on his heart. His face was extremely gloomy, but he could not lose his temper. He could only roar angrily, turn around, and leave. "Brother Zhu, I won't see you out." Xian Xiu smiled proudly as he watched Zhu Chun and the others leave. "Mr. Niet Tian, it's all thanks to you this time." "I thank you," Xian Xiu said sincerely as he looked at Niet Tian. Niet Tian smiled faintly and did not say anything. It was natural for one to be respected with strength. There was no need to say anything else. If he was not strong, he probably would not even be able to enter the Qiu Palace, let alone receive Xian Xiu's thanks. Xian Xiu was very respectful to Niet Tian, not only because of Niet Tian's strength, but also because of Niet Tian's identity. Ever since Niet Tian used the Spirit Dragon Ring to fight Mo Biming, Xian Xiu and the others believed that he was from the 10,000 Demons Dragon Abyss. Xian Tianluo even reminded Xian Xiu to be polite to Niet Tian and try his best to satisfy all of his requests. After dealing with the people from the Absolute Heaven sect, Niet Tian did not want to waste any more time. He still wanted to check on Xian Miao and the others. "Your Highness!" Right at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared in the skies. It was Crow. "Mr. Niet Tian." Crow bowed respectfully towards Niet Tian. "Crow, what's the matter?" Xian Xiu saw Crow's nervous expression, and his face darkened as he asked. "Your Highness, the people from Sky Sword Pavilion have arrived." Crow nodded solemnly. "Sky Sword Pavilion." Niet Tian and Xian Xiu exclaimed at the same time. Xian Xiu then looked at Niet Tian and asked, "Mr. Niet, do you also know about the Sky Sword Pavilion?" "I have." Niet Tian nodded and smiled. Sky Sword Pavilion. This was an organization that Niet Tian had come into contact with when he was in the 3,000 Small Worlds. Furthermore, he had a deep grudge with this organization. On one hand, Nietian had taken away the Nirvana Sacred Heart that originally belonged to Sky Sword Pavilion and killed the son of the Vice Pavilion Master. On the other hand, Nietian and Sun Hai had a good relationship. Jean de Bao had even become Sun Hai's disciple. Therefore, Nietian did not want to have any conflict with Sky Sword Pavilion. However, for the people from Sky Sword Pavilion to come at this time, their goal was probably similar to the people from the Absolute Heaven sect. Shinshou also thought of this and said to Crow, "Let them come to the martial arts practice field." Yes. Crow nodded and then disappeared. Nietian glanced at Shinshou. This guy was really cunning. Letting the people from Sky Sword Pavilion come to the martial arts practice field was obviously to use Nietian's strength to intimidate them. Nietian was also a little excited. He was very happy to see the people from Sky Sword Pavilion provoke him. His sword Dao realm had increased, and now he needed a real swordsman to test the power of his sword intent. A moment later, Crow appeared with a few figures. It's him. Nietian looked at those figures from afar and immediately recognized the faces of two of them. They were Sun Hai and Sikong Wuji. Ever since coming to the Sumi world, Nietian had not seen Sun Hai again. It seemed that the latter had successfully returned to Sky Sword Pavilion. As for Sikong Wuji, he had fought with Nietian in the 3,000 small worlds and was defeated by Nietian. Master Sun. Shinshou also recognized Sun Hai and could not help but exclaim. Nietian did not pay much attention to Sun Hai at this moment. Instead, he was looking at Sikong Wuji because the latter's strength surprised him. Sikong Wuji's strength was actually at the 9th level of Heavenly Evolution. Nietian remembered that Sikong Wuji was only at the 1st level of Heavenly Evolution when he was in the 3,000 small worlds. However, in just a few months, the latter's strength had risen to the 8th level. This speed was too strange. Sikong Wuji was not a very talented swordsman, and his willpower was also very ordinary. The speed at which his strength rose was beyond Nietian's expectations. Nietian. At this moment, Sun Hai and the others walked over. When they saw Nietian immediately, Sun Hai exclaimed in excitement. After coming to the Sumi world, he had been looking for Nietian and Jean de Bao, but he could not find them. He never thought that he would actually meet Nietian here. It's really him. Sikong Wuji also saw Nietian's face clearly. His eyes froze for a moment, and then a hint of killing intent flashed across them. Huh? Shinshou was stunned for a moment and asked in astonishment, "You know each other?" Nietian smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Sun and I are friends." Shinshou looked at Nietian strangely. He was surprised that the people Nietian knew were all big shots. Hui Jiao was one, and so was Sun Hai. Shinshou could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Since Nietian and Sun Hai knew each other, things would be very easy to handle. "Mr. Niao, are you okay? Is de Bao with you?" Sun Hai walked over excitedly, his voice trembling slightly. He had been very worried about Jean de Bao's safety. Now that he saw Nietian, how could he not ask? "Don't worry, Mr. Sun. De Bao is with me. He's fine." Nietian smiled faintly and did not explain too much. "Nietian, I didn't expect you to really dare to come to the Sumi world." At this moment, Sikong Wuji stepped over and released a huge sword intent from his body, pressing directly towards Nietian. Boom! Nietian's body shook slightly, and he also released his sword intent. The two huge forces collided in the void, causing a violent explosion. Nietian and Sikong Wuji both took a few steps back at the same time, and their faces did not look good. Sikong Wuji's strength had increased strangely, but Nietian was not the Nietian from before. The collision of their sword intents was actually evenly matched. Sikong Wuji stabilized his body and stared fixedly at Nietian. He could not hide his surprise. He did not expect Nietian to be able to compete with him head-on in sword intent and not be at a disadvantage at all. But how was this possible? He was currently at the 9th level of Heavenly Evolution and could even advance to the Sword Soul realm soon. Nietian was only at the 5th level of Heavenly Evolution and had just entered the Sword Spirit realm. How could he be evenly matched with him? Sikon Wuji, you have already been defeated by me once. Do you want to be defeated a second time? Nie Tian said coldly when he saw Sikon Wuji attack right from the start. Chapter 807. Sikon Wuji stared at Nie Tian with unconcealable killing intent in his eyes. Being defeated by Nie Tian in the 3,000 small worlds was Sikon Wuji's greatest humiliation. Ever since he returned to the Sumeru world, this matter had been on his mind. Now that he met Nie Tian, the latter had opened up the scar in his heart, which made him even angrier. This time, he not only wanted to defeat Nie Tian, but he also wanted to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian sensed Sikon Wuji's killing intent, but his face remained calm as he asked, "Do you really want to fight me again?" "Fight!" The calmer Nie Tian was, the angrier Sikon Wuji became. He growled, "Not only do I want to fight you, but I want to fight to the death with you." Sikon Wuji was already furious after being defeated by Nie Tian. Now that his opponent was provoking him, how could he tolerate it? Today he must kill Nie Tian. Otherwise, he would not be able to dispel the hatred in his heart. "Junior brother, you can't. You can't," Sun Hai shouted before Nie Tian could speak. Both Nie Tian and Sikon Wuji were important to him. He did not want to see either of them die. "Senior brother, I've already decided. You don't have to persuade me anymore." Sikon Wuji was determined and did not listen to Sun Hai's advice. At this time, Sun Hai's gaze turned to a girl in white beside Sikon Wuji. He said hurriedly, "Little junior sister, please persuade junior brother Sikon. He usually listens to you." The girl that Sun Hai called little junior sister was only 15 or 16 years old. She had delicate features, a sweet face, and big eyes. She gave off a cute feeling. Her name was Lushan, the daughter of the Sky Sword Pavilion's pavilion master. Lushan acted as if she did not hear Sun Hai's words. She stared at Nie Tian with her big eyes and suddenly said, "Senior brother Sun, he was the one who took away our Sky Sword Pavilion's Nirvana, Sacred Heart, right?" Sun Hai was speechless. At this time, Lushan was still concerned about the Nirvana Sacred Heart. "Yes." Sun Hai didn't say anything, but Sikon nodded heavily and said, "Junior sister, this is the person who took away the Nirvana Sacred Heart. The two traders from the Sword Pavilion were also killed by this person." Lushan's brows slightly furrowed, and her little face darkened with anger. She loudly said, "Fine, I approve of senior brother Sikon's fight to the death with him." Well, Sun Hai was struck dumb. He had hoped that Lushan would persuade Sikon Wuji, but unexpectedly, Lushan supported Sikon Wuji. In this case, the situation was irreversible. "Mr. Nie Tian, my junior brother and junior sister are still young." Sun Hai looked at Nie Tian awkwardly. Others might not know about Nie Tian's capability, but he was very clear about it. Even the people of the Sacred Light Empire had been defeated by Nie Tian, so how could Sikon Wuji be his match? In Sun Hai's opinion, a life-and-death battle between Sikon Wuji and Nie Tian was no different from suicide. But under such circumstances, he couldn't ask Nie Tian to back down. Cowering in fear of battle was a disgrace to a martial artist. Nie Tian glanced at Sikon Wuji, then looked at Sun Hai and said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, Mr. Sun. I won't kill him." "Huh?" Hearing Nie Tian's words, Sikon Wuji's face darkened, and he roared, "Nie Tian, what do you mean by that?" Looking at Nie Tian's attitude, it was as if he would definitely win and could directly control his life or death. Sikon Wuji was clearly not taking Sikon Wuji seriously. Nie Tian completely ignored Sikon Wuji and continued to say to Sun Hai, "Mr. Sun, I want to know what happened to Sikon Wuji." Sikon Wuji's strength had advanced from the first level of Heavenly Evolution to the 9th level of Heavenly Evolution in just a few months. He must have had a fortuitous encounter. Humph. Before Sun Hai could speak, Sikon Wuji sneered and said, "Are you very curious? There's no harm in telling you, so that you can die knowing." Sikon Wuji's eyes were filled with pride as he said loudly, 1.5 months ago, I entered the sword tomb of the Sky Sword Pavilion to cultivate and integrated the sword intent left behind by the seniors of the Sky Sword Pavilion. Not only has my strength greatly improved, But what's more terrifying is that I am now a swordsman with two types of sword intents. Two types of sword intents. Sikon Wuji emphasized this point and said, "Since ancient times, I am the only swordsman who has been able to cultivate two types of sword intents. Moreover, I am about to advance to the Sword Soul realm. What makes you think you can fight with me?" The Sword Tomb integrated the sword intent of the seniors of the Sky Sword Pavilion. Nyetian pondered for a while, then shook his head and smiled. He had already guessed that the Sword Tomb should be the place where all the peerless swordsmen of the Sky Sword Pavilion had fallen. Sikon Wuji had obtained an opportunity to train, which undoubtedly integrated with the sword intent inheritance left behind by the swordsman, and his strength had greatly improved. This way, Sikon Wuji had two types of sword intents, which was indeed very terrifying. Two types of sword intents. Xian Xiu's eyes trembled slightly, and he said in astonishment, "Is there really such a swordsman in the world?" "Yes." Sun Hai nodded slightly and said, "Junior brother Sikon does have two types of sword intents." With that, Sun Hai glanced at Nyetian again. Even if Sikon Wuji had two types of sword intents, it was impossible for him to be a match for Nyetian. Nyetian's strength was too terrifying and strange, and it was not something that Sikon Wuji could imagine at all. Nyetian could not help but smile at this moment. He had to admit that Sikon Wuji was really lucky. First, he had the innate sword intent, which was one of the strongest sword intents in the world. Now, he had obtained the sword intent inheritance and possessed the second type of sword intent. These two pieces of sh*t had been very lucky. However, there was nothing he could do about it. This was fate. Whether a martial artist could reach the peak or not depended on talent and perseverance on one hand, and luck and opportunity on the other. Without these two great opportunities, with Sikon Wuji's talent and perseverance, he would at most be an ordinary swordsman, and he might not be able to reach the stage of sword momentum in his lifetime. However, with the opportunity, he had reached the stage of sword spirit at such a young age, and was about to reach the stage of sword soul soon. Nyetian could only say that Sikon Wuji was lucky to be born into a good family. Seeing that Nyetian didn't say anything, Sikon Wuji laughed complacently and taunted, "Are you scared, Nyetian?" "Afraid?" Nyetian curled his lips and said coldly, "The two types of sword intent you have are not your own, but you are just lucky. If you were not lucky, you wouldn't even be qualified to talk to me." "Nyetian, Sikon Wuji's face turned cold, and he was so angry that he couldn't say a word. However, he had no idea that he had two types of sword intents, while Nyetian had three types of sword intents, and all three types of sword intents were extremely powerful, especially the Star Soul sword intent and the Thunderbolt sword intent, which were even more powerful than the AO sword intent and the Wuji sword intent. "All right, since you have two types of sword intents, you are barely qualified to fight with me. I will play with you." Nyetian smiled faintly, as if he was coaxing a child. Chapter 808. Sikon Wuji looked at Nyetian resentfully. He could sense the disdain in Nyetian's eyes. This disdain was genuine. "Mr. Nyetian, junior brother Sikon's status in Sky Sword Pavilion is not the same as before. Please show mercy," Sun Hai said to Sikon Wuji through telepathy as he looked at Nyetian. Nyetian nodded slightly and did not say anything else. Sun Hai felt much more relaxed with Nyetian's assurance. "I don't believe that you're a match for senior brother Sikon." Lushan pouted and said unhappily. Nyetian shook his head slightly and did not blame her. After all, he had swallowed the nirvana sacred heart of Sky Sword Pavilion. It was normal for this little girl to be hostile to him. "Nyetian, come on." At this moment, Sikon Wuji let out a long roar. With a stomp of his foot, his figure landed on the training ground. His entire body was emitting a strong sword intent. He stood there, looking as sharp as a sword. With a faint smile, Nyetian blurred into action and landed in front of Sikon Wuji. Facing Sikon Wuji, Nyetian's eyes were calm. There was no killing intent, only fighting intent. Although he did not kill Sikon Wuji, it did not mean that he would not go all out. Sikon Wuji was a heavenly evolution realm martial artist. His sword principle had reached the peak of sword spirit, and he had 2 sword intents in his body. He was a very good opponent. Compared to Sikon Wuji, Nietion's biggest advantage was his sword intent. He had 3 sword intents, and each of them was strong enough. They were definitely not weaker than the Wuji sword intent. Nietion, I wanted to kill you for a long time. Sikon Wuji, said Nietion coldly. His defeat that day was the humiliation of his life. Today, he must win, and he must win beautifully. At this moment, Sikon Wuji had an exciting idea. He wanted to kill Nietion in one move. That's right. Only then could he eliminate the hatred in his heart. Kill me. Nietion smiled faintly. There was not the slightest ripple in his eyes. He was terrifyingly calm as he said coldly, Do you have the strength to do so? Whether I have the strength or not, you will soon know. Sikon Wuji roared angrily. A soaring, murderous aura rushed out, almost condensing into a substance, and spread to the surroundings. The murderous aura was so terrifying that the entire world seemed to be filled with it. Sun Hai and the rest were thousands of meters away, but they could clearly feel the sharp killing intent coming from Sikon Wuji's body, causing them to be unable to help but be moved. Junior brother Sikon, you're still too young. Sun Hai felt the killing intent, but he shook his head and sighed in his heart. Lu Shan, on the other hand, was both nervous and excited. She viewed Nietion as the Heaven Sword Pavilion's sex enemy and couldn't wait to kill him. Xian Xiu was very calm. Tian, Xiu said with Tian, Xian Tian with him Tian. Qi Shueqiu. Although Sikon Wuji was much stronger than Ho Yin, he was still no match for Nietion. Nietion, I'll show you the power of my dual sword essences. Sikon Wuji roared in the air. A powerful sword essence surged out from his body. A purple brilliance shone and enveloped his body, releasing a terrifying, murderous aura. Nietion looked at the purple brilliance in the air and smiled. It was the second sword essence. This sword essence was very similar to the Wuji sword essence. No wonder Sikon Wuji could fuse with it. Bang! Sikon Wuji took a step and soared into the sky. He was like a shocking sword that had the power to tear the world apart. The sword essence raged in the air, and a majestic sword hum sounded like Wan Jian's wailing. I'll take your life with this sword. Sikon Wuji looked down at Nietion. A sharp sword essence instantly condensed, and the 7 void sword appeared in his hand. He held it with both hands and slashed down. Buzz dash. In the blink of an eye, the space was torn apart by the powerful sword intent, emitting a terrifying buzzing sound. Immediately after, the endless sword intent pressed down. The rumbling sounds continued unceasingly. The brilliance of the sword suddenly bloomed. A terrifying purple crack appeared in the space. What a powerful sword! Sun Hai and the others couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. Sun Hai knew that Sikon Wuji had fused with the purple light sword essence, and his strength had made a qualitative leap, but he didn't expect the latter's combat strength to be so strong. At this moment, Xian Xiu couldn't help but feel nervous for Nietion. Nietion looked at Sikon Wuji, who was in the air, and the corner of his mouth raised into a faint smile. He murmured, Sikon Wuji, do you really want to kill me? This is only the first sword, and you're already impatient. The mighty sword essence above his head pressed down. Nietion's eyes narrowed slightly, and a light flickered in his eyes. Sikon Wuji had fused the power of 2 sword essences. The power of this sword was extremely terrifying, but Nietion wasn't afraid. He could have used the heaven-shrouding totem and absolute tremor to defeat Sikon Wuji in one move, but he wouldn't do that. He wanted to defeat Sikon Wuji with his sword essence. In the next moment, Nietion took a step, and his figure rose against the momentum. His whole body's aura instantly soared. An endless sword essence gushed out crazily. In his hand, the absolute heaven slash appeared again. A cold light suddenly appeared on the edge of the sword, and a dazzling sword light appeared, like a sharp blade that could split the sky. 8 Desolation Sword. Niet Tianling's indifferent voice sounded. The sword essence around his body immediately condensed, and then bombarded like a stormy sea. Suddenly, the majestic sword essence gushed out. Boom! Boom! In the void, two pure sword essences collided with each other. The terrible sword essence tore everything apart, and the space began to wail. This was a battle between two sword essences, and it was extremely terrifying. Both Nietian and Sikon Wuji's sword essences were very terrifying. The space within thousands of meters was covered by the sword essences, and it became an ocean of sword essences. The two figures were completely submerged in the ocean of sword essences. Sun Hai and the others could no longer see the figures of Nietian and Sikon Wuji. They could only see the endless sword essences colliding with each other, devouring each other, and tearing each other apart. Sun Hai was stunned, and his tongue began to spin. He didn't know what to say. He didn't expect the battle between the two to be so violent and direct. This was a real battle between sword essences. Senior brother Sun, who won? Lu Shan couldn't see anything, and her forehead was covered with dense sweat. She didn't expect that there would be such terrifying swordsmen in this world, apart from the swordsmen of Sky Sword Pavilion. Sun Hai shook his head slightly. He also didn't know how the battle was going. The battle between sword essences in the air lasted for a few minutes. After that, the sword essences gradually weakened, and the space gradually became clear. Two figures appeared in front of everyone. Nietian's figure stood in the air, holding a long sword in his hand. His silver hair fluttered in the wind, and he looked like a sword god. On the other hand, Sikon Wuji was covered with blood, and he was panting heavily on the spot. His eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. There was no doubt that Sikon Wuji lost. In this battle of sword essences, Niet Tian finally won. "You lost," Niet Tian said lightly, and then his figure moved, preparing to leave. He didn't want to waste his breath on a person like Sikon Wuji, so he chose to end the battle directly. "Impossible." Suddenly, Sikon Wuji roared, "I don't believe it. I'm going to kill you." Chapter 809. Sikon Wuji was defeated. Nietian didn't kill him, but he wasn't convinced. He attacked from behind and wanted to kill Nietian. This was an unexpected scene that no one could have imagined. "Junior brother, don't." Sun Hai was the first to react. He screamed, and his back was covered in cold sweat. "Senior brother." Lu Shan screamed. She didn't expect Sikon Wuji to attack from behind. "You're courting death." Nietian felt a gust of cold wind behind him. His eyes flashed with killing intent. He turned around and stabbed with his sword. Boom! A huge sword shadow appeared in the air and pressed towards Sikon Wuji. Sikon Wuji was already an arrow at the end of its flight. He couldn't resist the attack at all. He screamed in the air, and his body fell down like a meteor. When Sun Hai saw this scene, his figure flashed and caught Sikon Wuji before he landed on the ground. "Junior brother Sikon, why did you do this?" Sun Hai let out a sigh of relief when he sensed that Sikon Wuji's aura was still there. He then landed. At this time, Nietian landed beside Sun Hai and said coldly, "Mr. Sun, Sikon Wuji is too impulsive and is destined to be a failure. Attacking from behind is a taboo for a swordsman. Even if he succeeds, his sword principle will be tarnished and he will lose his dignity as a swordsman. If Sky Sword Pavilion still treats a swordsman like him as a treasure, I can only give you 4 words. Take care." Sikon Wuji's talent and sword principle was only average. It was just that he was luckier than ordinary people. If he had a strong mind, he might have been able to achieve something in sword principle with the 2 strong sword intents in his body. Unfortunately, he was not strong enough and was arrogant. He was destined to be mediocre. "How dare you?" Before Sun Hai could speak, Lu Shan couldn't hold her temper anymore and rebuked. "Sky Sword Pavilion represents the pinnacle of sword principle in the Shumi world. You are just a swordsman from the 3,000 small worlds. What right do you have to criticize Sky Sword Pavilion? Even if senior brother Sikon lost to you, it was because he was careless. It doesn't mean you are stronger than him." "Humph." Nietian cast a cold glance at Lu Shan and said in an indifferent tone, Little girl, he was careless when he lost to me once. Is it still careless when he lost to me twice? If everyone in Sky Sword Pavilion was as careless as him, they would have already been removed from the Shumi world. You? Lushan was rendered speechless by Nietian's words. Her delicate face flushed with anger. Nietian fixed his eyes on Lushan and continued, Little girl, your talent in sword Dao is pretty good, and your sword intent is also strong. If you can restrain yourself and focus on sword Dao, you'll definitely surpass Sikon Wuji in the future. But if you continue to be arrogant, you won't achieve anything in the future. I said, Tion's Tion. Tion, 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 T, Tion, Tion, Tion. Tion, 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 Tion. I, T, Tion. I, T, I, T. Tion, Ton, Tion, T, Tion, I, Tion, T, Tion, Tion, Tion. Just now, Mr. Nya already showed mercy to junior brother Sikon. Otherwise, junior brother Sikon wouldn't be alive. Even though Sun Hai had asked Nietian to go easy on Sikon Wuji, Nietian could have killed him with a single swing of his sword. However, Nietian had already given Sun Haitian a lot of face by not doing so. Thank you, Mr. Nya. Sun Hai looked at Nietian and thanked him sincerely. Nietian nodded and didn't say anything. When he fought with Sikon Wuji, he won by a hair's breadth. Luckily, his three-sword wills were strong enough. Otherwise, it would be hard to say who would win. If Sikon Wuji had entered the Sword Soul stage, Nietian wouldn't have been able to match him in a battle of sword arts alone. After his battle against Sikon Wuji, Nietian's sword intent had been tempered and sharpened. He was in the Sword Spirit realm. Above that was the Sword Soul, and the Sword Profound. Nietian still had a long way to go before he could reach the pinnacle of sword arts he had achieved in his previous life. Sikon Wuji was knocked out by Nietian again and was seriously injured. He would need at least 10 days to half a month to recover. Sun Hai told Xianxiu that he would stay in Xiu Palace for half a month. Of course, Xianxiu agreed. It would be best if he could ally with the Sky Sword Pavilion in the upcoming Wind Cloud art. The Sky Sword Pavilion was very strong, and it could be said to be the strongest of the 5 great forces. If they joined hands with the Sky Sword Pavilion, they would have an additional layer of protection in the forbidden land of wind and cloud. Xianxiu looked at Niet Tian strangely. He heard from Lushan that Niet Tian was from the 3,000 small worlds, but he didn't know if it was true. If it was true, Niet Tian was too scary. He grew up in the 3,000 small worlds and had such strength. It was unimaginable. Xianxiu was sure that Niet Tian was from the Demon Dragon Abyss. He wondered if the Demon Dragon Abyss had a force in the lower world. After making arrangements for Sikon Wuji and the others, Niet Tian prepared to take Sun Hai to see Jean de Bao. Senior, I want to go with you, Lushan suddenly said when the two were about to leave. Junior, I want to see my disciple. You don't need to come with me, Sun Hai said with a frown. He didn't mind, but Lushan was very hostile to Niet Tian. It would be bad if there was a conflict between the two. Lushan looked at Niet Tian and said, Do you want me to come with you? Niet Tian was speechless. This girl was very unruly. After thinking for a while, Niet Tian said, It's up to you. You have legs. I don't care where you want to go. Then I'll take it as you agree, Lushan nodded and said solemnly. Niet Tian and Sun Hai looked at each other and were speechless. That was an agreement. The three left the Qiu Palace and came to the main street of the Imperial City. Mr. Niet Tian, why are you with the 19th Prince of the Imperial City? Sun Hai looked at Niet Tian and asked curiously. Niet Tian didn't hide it and told him what happened after he came to the Shumi world. So you decide the wind and cloud duel in the Imperial City? Sun Hai was shocked after hearing Niet Tian's words. Although Niet Tian said it casually, Sun Hai felt that it wasn't easy for Niet Tian to come this far. Yes, Niet Tian nodded and said, I want DeBao to come with me to the forbidden land of wind and cloud. Sun Hai was Jean DeBao's teacher after all. He had to discuss this with him. This? Sun Hai looked a little embarrassed and said, DeBao is too weak. If he enters the forbidden land of wind and cloud, I'm afraid. Chapter 810. All right. Seeing Niet Tian's solemn expression, Sun Hai finally nodded. If DeBao is willing, I have no objections. He will be willing. Nyetian nodded with a confident smile. Debeo trusted Nyetian very much. Even his teacher, Sun Hai, could not replace this kind of trust. As long as Nyetian said it, Debeo would dare to go through mountains of blades and seas of fire. Senior brother, I also want to participate in the wind cloud contest. Lushan suddenly looked at Sun Hai and said with a serious expression, Little junior sister, don't mess around. Sun Hai was startled at first, then smiled and waved his hand. Lushan was not weak. She was already at the first level of heavenly evolution. She was very talented to have this kind of strength at the age of 15. However, it would be a joke if she wanted to participate in the wind cloud contest. In the hundreds of years since the wind cloud contest began, almost all the cultivators who entered the forbidden land of wind were at the 9th level of heavenly evolution. However, no one had walked out alive. It was suicide for Lushan to enter the forbidden land of wind with her strength. Also, Lushan's status was too high. She was the daughter of the Sky Sword Pavilion Master. The Pavilion Master would definitely not allow her to participate. I'm not joking. I must participate in the trial of wind and cloud, Lushan said stubbornly. Sun Hai glanced at her, sweat beading on his forehead. This little girl couldn't be serious, right? He knew that Lushan was very stubborn, just like her Pavilion Master father. Once she decided on something, she would not change her mind. If she really wanted to participate in the wind cloud contest, no one could change her mind unless she was tied up. Junior sister, participating in the wind cloud contest is not a small matter. The forbidden land of wind is full of dangers. With your strength, you will definitely die, Sun Hai said gravely. I'm not afraid. Lushan pouted and pointed at Nyetian. Since he can protect Debeo, he can protect me too. Protect you? Nyetian froze and almost couldn't react. He said in shock, Why should I protect you? Lushan's eyes widened, and she said very seriously, You took away our Sky Sword Pavilion's Nirvana Sacred Heart and killed our people. I won't pursue this matter anymore. Can't you protect me instead? Nyetian's face stiffened, and he did not react for a long time. This little girl had a solemn expression on her face, as if what she said was very reasonable. Suddenly, Nyetian felt that he had no reason to reject her. All right, since you have nothing to say, then this matter is settled. After I enter the forbidden land of wind and cloud, you must stay close to me and ensure my safety. Lushan nodded seriously, her eyes filled with unconcealable pride. Little junior sister, you can't. At this moment, Sun Hai was already on the verge of tears. If the Pavilion Master found out about this after he returned to Sky Sword Pavilion, he would definitely eat him alive. Senior brother, don't be afraid. I will take care of my father. Lushan giggled, revealing the liveliness of a young girl. Sun Hai had a mournful expression and thought, Little junior sister, if you take care of your father will also take care of me. Right now, Sun Hai was extremely regretful. He should not have brought Lushan to the Black Moon Empire. At this moment, Lushan was skipping in front of him. She seemed to be in a very good mood. Sun Hai looked helplessly at Nyetian. The latter could only shrug helplessly, expressing that there was nothing he could do to help. If Sky Sword Pavilion really allowed Lushan to participate in the wind and cloud trial, Nyetian would do his best to protect her. That's right, Mr. Sun. I have not gone to Sky Sword Pavilion to ask for forgiveness. Did the Vice Pavilion Master make things difficult for you? Nyetian suddenly thought of this matter and asked. At this moment, Sun Hai's expression softened a little, and he said, The Vice Pavilion Master has been in seclusion recently and is not in the pavilion. Let's talk about forgiveness in the future. All right. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, Anyway, I still have a lot of things to deal with. I might as well visit Sky Sword Pavilion after the wind and cloud trial. Regarding Sky Sword Pavilion, Nyetian was also a bit curious. Lushan had just said that Sky Sword Pavilion was the pinnacle of sword principle in the Sumru world. Nyetian wanted to see how this pinnacle of sword principle was. Just when Nyetian and the others were about to reach the Jade Mansion, a roar came from the void, Don't go. Hearing the voice, Nyetian immediately looked up. In the air, A figure in purple was flying at an extremely fast speed, and behind it, several figures in black were chasing closely. Although they were hundreds of meters apart, Nyetian could see very clearly with his starry sky eyes that the figure in purple was very, very familiar. That figure was none other than Rainy Thousand Leaves. She had an exquisite face and a frosty aura. Chinya. Nyetian was astonished, and his head was buzzing. He never thought that he would see Rui Chinyu here. At this time, Rui Chinyu should be in closed-door training in the 3,000 Small Worlds. Why was she here? Mr. Nya, are you okay? Sun Hai also looked at the figures in the air and suddenly noticed that there was something wrong with Nyetian's reaction. So he frowned and asked, Mr. Sun, you go to the Jade Mansion first. I have something to do, so I will go to the Jade Mansion to find you later. Nyetian reacted and said hurriedly. Immediately, he took a step and flew into the air, chasing in the direction where Rui Chinyu disappeared. He knows that woman in purple? Sun Hai looked at the direction where Nyetian disappeared and muttered to himself. Senior brother, where is that guy? Lishan looked back and suddenly couldn't see Nyetian's figure, so she asked in surprise. You want to chase after someone? Sun Hai shook his head slightly and said, Chasing after the person just now? Lishan looked into the air and vaguely saw Nyetian's figure. Immediately, her figure moved, and she actually chased after him. Her voice echoed in the air. Senior brother, I will go after that guy. Little junior sister. Before Sun Hai could react, Lishan's figure had already disappeared. Sun Hai knew that his strength was not as good as Lishan's, so it was not good for him to chase after her. He could only pray in his heart that nothing happened to her. In the air, Nyetian's figure was running wildly. Rui Chinyu's speed was very fast, and the people chasing after her were also very strong. They were actually 3 Heavenly Evolution Realm Martial Artists and 1 Heavenly Being Realm Martial Artist. The 4 men in black were very murderous. It was obvious that they were chasing after Rui Chinyu. Nyetian was worried about Rui Chinyu's safety. His figure flickered in the air, and in the blink of an eye, he was dozens of miles away from the Imperial City. At this time, Rui Chinyu's figure suddenly descended and actually entered the Tsang Long mountain range. The black-clothed figures also descended and disappeared into the forest. Oh no! Nyetian secretly cursed in his heart. His figure became even faster, and he chased after the place where Rui Chinyu and the rest had disappeared. The Tsang Long mountain range was densely forested, and there were mountains and rocks everywhere. It was a great obstruction to Nyetian's eye of the sky. Once he entered the depths of the mountain range, it would not be easy for Nyetian to find Rui Chinyu. Nyetian's figure landed in the mountain range and stopped on a huge rock. Rumble. Just as his figure landed, the boulder actually moved with a rumble. Nyetian's eyes trembled. He took a step, and his figure scuttled dozens of meters away. He looked back again. What appeared in front of him was not a huge rock, but a giant snake that was hundreds of meters long. Chapter 811. Nyetian looked at the giant snake in front of him and narrowed his eyes. The giant snake was more than 300 meters long, and its entire body was covered in palm-sized scales. It looked like pieces of rock and was extremely hard. The strangest thing was that there was a layer of yellow halo circulating on the giant snake's body, releasing a violent aura. Beast light. Nyetian couldn't help but tremble. The yellow halo on the giant snake was beast light, which was the sign of a rank 8 spirit beast. Beast light was equivalent to a celestial realm warrior's celestial realm, which only rank 8 spirit beast possessed. Nyetian didn't expect to meet a rank 8 spirit beast here. Just now, he focused all his attention on Rui Chinyu and the others, so he didn't notice that there was a rank 8 spirit beast hiding here. The battle strength of a rank 8 spirit beast was comparable to a celestial realm warrior, and the giant snake in front of him was surrounded by beast light, so it should be an expert among the rank 8 spirit beasts. Even an ordinary celestial realm warrior might not be a match for it. Phew! Nyetian let out a long breath and forced himself to calm down. According to the current situation, he had to deal with this giant snake first. Chi! 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 The giant snake's triangular eyes rolled, and a violent aura rose from its body. Its giant body moved, making an ear-piercing sound. Nyetian held the absolute heaven tightly, not daring to be careless. The absolute power of this giant snake was definitely no less than a celestial realm warrior. If it hit him head-on, Nyetian would be seriously injured, if not killed. After a few seconds of confrontation, the giant snake finally couldn't stand it anymore and attacked first. Boom! Its giant body turned over, and the trees and rocks within 1,000 meters were all destroyed. A huge airwave in the space pressed toward Nyetian. Nyetian took a step, jumped up, and slashed down with his sword. A horrible sword intent bloomed in the space, condensed into a sword shadow of 100 meters, and bombarded the giant snake's head. Bang! The shadow of the sword fell and hit the head of the giant snake. However, there was a dull sound, and sparks flew in the air as if the sword intent had been distorted. Nyetian hastily retreated. When he took a closer look, he realized that his all-out attack hadn't hurt the giant snake at all. What a strong defense! Nyetian sucked in a breath of cold air. His sword strike, just now, was enough to instantly kill a 9th-level heavenly evolution martial artist, but it was no threat to the giant snake at all. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The giant snake's head shook. It was completely enraged. It flicked its tongue, and a yellow light suddenly shot out. A destructive aura rushed towards Nyetian. In the space, there was no violent explosion. Only a destructive force blossomed in the void. The destructive force turned into a terrifying ripple, like a ripple, spreading in all directions, enveloping Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes trembled slightly, and he quickly retreated. Although Nyetian's reaction was extremely fast, he was still touched by the destructive force. A terrible, bone-deep wound appeared on his body, and blood gushed out. In the space, the smell of blood spread, and the surroundings were filled with the smell of blood. This giant snake is so powerful. Large beads of sweat seeped out of Nyetian's forehead, but the determination in his eyes did not change. His eyes released a cold, murderous intent. Fortunately, he had the 9-star dragon vein constitution and was supported by the power of the stars. Otherwise, he would have been a corpse. The giant snake's attack and defense were above Nyetian's expectations. If he wanted to defeat his opponent, he had to show his true strength. Evil creature, since you made me bleed, I'll make you die. Nyetian growled. Since the blood had been spilled, he could not waste it. He took a step in the void, and his whole body released a terrifying, murderous aura. At this moment, the blood around his body flew up, turned into a faint blood mist, and spread around his body. The forbidden move, the first move of the 3 strokes of annihilation, Weeping Blood Soul. A cold voice sounded. Without hesitation, Nyetian slashed out with his sword. Boom! In midair, the terrifying sword intent condensed into a huge blood-colored sword shadow. The murderous aura and the destructive aura bloomed in an instant and pressed down on the giant snake. Hiss, hiss. The giant snake seemed to have sensed that something was wrong. It quickly flicked its tongue and turned its head, trying to escape. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom! The sword of destruction slashed down, and a 1,000-meter-long sword aura burst out. Everything around it was affected by the sword aura, and everything was destroyed. In the endless airwaves, Nyetian saw that the giant snake's body was slightly stagnant, and then it fell powerlessly. He waved his arm, and the turbid waves in the air dispersed, and saw the giant snake lying on the ground, dying. What a strong defense. It took the Weeping Blood Soul head on, and it's still alive. Nyetian couldn't help but say when he saw that the giant snake was still alive. The giant snake's strength was very strong, but it didn't know how to use it. Moreover, Nyetian saw that its head was its fatal weakness, which was why he was able to seriously injure it. If a martial artist had this kind of strength, Nyetian would have to pay a high price to win. Without hesitation, Nyetian stabbed down with his sword. A sharp sword aura whistled out and directly penetrated the back of the giant snake's head and took out a light yellow spirit core the size of a human head. The spirit core of an 8th-rank spirit beast. It contains violent power and can be used to refine a good spirit pill. Tian smiled faintly and put the spirit core into the space ring. After getting rid of the giant snake, Tian's face was filled with worry. He looked around, and there was no sign of Rui Qinyu and the others within 10 kilometers. Oh no! Tian's eyes narrowed, and he frowned. Rui Qinyu has just arrived in the Meru world, and her strength is at most at the first stage of heavenly evolution. The people chasing after her are all above the 9th stage of heavenly evolution. If they catch up to her, she will definitely die. Tian didn't know how Rui Qinyu had provoked such a powerful opponent. He was worried about her safety, so he left immediately and began to search. After a while, Tian finally found some clues. He saw traces of fight on the ground, but there was no blood. Following the aura, Tian quickly arrived at a canyon. The canyon was very long, but it wasn't wide. The narrowest part was only 5 or 6 meters wide. Tian looked up and murmured, "This canyon is almost a dead end. It would be terrible if Rui Qinyu was trapped here." With these thoughts in mind, Tian sped off. At that moment, Tian suddenly sensed a figure running toward him, and he couldn't help but frown. Why is she here? Tian sensed that the person behind him was none other than Lushan from Sky Sword Pavilion. On the other side of the canyon, dozens of kilometers away, a fierce battle was going on. "Little girl, let me give you a piece of advice. Be obedient and surrender. Don't ask for trouble." 4 men in black slowly closed in, and one of them had a sinister look on his face as he spoke in a deep voice. Rui Qinyu's eyes trembled, and her aura was ice-cold like a 10,000-year-old iceberg.